Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again,
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
What's up, everyone? Welcome, one and all, to this Thursday evening edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, here, of course, with Russell Dobular.
hello.
And Russell curated a little something for our early birds in the audience who were chatting up a storm earlier.
Little surprise. I was watching y'all, and you inspired me to dig this up for you.
Can you dig it?
See? Look at the care he takes for you guys. How do you like that?
Anything for the fans.
Yeah, anything for the fans. Anything for the fans. That's true. Don Johnson's in here. He says, hey, Don Johnson, somebody told me that you addressed our friends over there at the Bill and Ted show, asking them for a response, and they didn't give you one. I'm sorry about that, but thanks for trying. And I heard you gave him a little super chat, so thank you for doing that, Don Johnson. And I love your avatar image. Thank you very much.
They didn't want a fresh one.
No, of course. Look, I don't blame them. I think they did the right thing. I think they made the right call there.
I think that was
decision
probably
they've made since they started the show. Actually,
it's like they say, you pick the discretion as the better part of the valor.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, guys, we have a packed show for you this evening. We have a couple of wonderful guests from United for East Palestine who we're going to bring on in a little while after we do our headlines. Before we do our headlines, though, I just want to tell my own little travel story because obviously Russell's been telling a lot of travel stories. He went to India for a month. I went to a far less exotic place this
7-Eleven.
last week. Yeah, to 7-Eleven. I went to Albany, New York. My wife and I actually spent our anniversary with the kids in a hotel in Albany, New York, because she works up there and we're looking for apartments up there. And we thought since it was going to blizzard, we should go up there, look for places. This way she'd be close to work so she wouldn't have to do a long commute in the snow. I stayed at the most bizarre hotel I've ever stayed at in my life. It's called the Century House. It's like this really old hotel. We got it really cheap. So we get there, and all I'm looking for in a hotel is a place where I can hook up my laptop to the TV via USB so I can put on the TV shows that my kids watch all day, because I was going to be snowed in with my kids for at least a day, if not two. I needed the TV to work. I get there, despite the old-time decor, the hotel is decorated. The room, they're clearly going for some sort of weird, trendy sort of cruise ship theme. They have cubby holes instead of a closet for your clothes. They have hardwood floors. They have the bathroom door is on a roller thing, like on a cabin on a boat. And then the TV is mounted to this wood plank, which is bolted to the wall, which really screwed me up. I was a little bit of a Karen. I asked if I could get the room switched to one of their standard rooms. Do they have the old-fashioned rooms? Listen, I'm going to be snowed in with my kids for 2 days. I need to be able to hook my USB cable or the HDMI cable up to the TV. Do you have anything? First she said she did, then she said she didn't because I think they were booked because of the storm or whatever. So I had to make it work. I had to run out. I had to get an extension cord. It was a nightmare. But the theme of this hotel was apparently a cruise ship theme, which is I don't understand who goes to Albany to pretend they're on a cruise. Like, what clientele are you serving there?
Well,
I
it's
went to
landlocked.
Albany for the same reason that everyone goes to Albany, because I had to. That's it. I'm not looking for an experience. And all the gimmicks about the cubby holes and the sliding doors, the shower didn't have a curtain. It was just like one glass pane. It was so weird. It's like you put up with boat living when you're on a boat because you're on a boat. This is like the concept of this hotel was like to recreate the inconvenience of maritime living, but on land. It was the weirdest thing. So anyway, that's my travel story. That's my travel story.
So it's like you stayed in a cheap motel and it didn't even have that David Lynch noir threadbare carpet, weirdos in the hallways charm.
Exactly. Well, I also
Didn't even
wanted a
get that.
carpet. Yeah, I wanted a carpet, wanted something a little cozy. It was going to be snowing outside. Of course, what do kids do at hotels? Every kid who has ever been to a hotel does the same thing. They see two beds right near each other. They jump across them. So you want to have the carpet on the floor in case there's an accident, right? Didn't even get that. It was a very bizarre experience. Cyrus, thank you for the $20. Appreciate that very much. Abiding 71. Abiding 71, thanks for the super sticker. And Devin Doyle, thanks for the $4.99. Remember, ladies, Russell's is single. Yeah, don't encourage that, my friend.
You really don't want to encourage that.
Great dad, international marriage experience, solid hairline. DM me.
I'm going to quote Peter O'Toole in The Lion in Winter. I could have conquered all of Europe if I hadn't had women in my life.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to commemorate another. Go ahead.
Yeah. How many subscribers are we at now, Keaton?
We are at 6,666 subscribers as of the beginning. Mark of the beast. That's right. In fact, now that we've started the show in this fashion, we're back down to 5,831. So sorry, missed our chance to do that. But no, now we're at 6668. We got to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Everybody, thank you guys all for showing up. Those of you who showed up, I appreciate it. We didn't realize going into tonight, not only are we competing with Sabby tonight, but Sabby has Matt Taibbi tonight. So we are up against a star tonight. But that's all right. We're gonna do our best to make it worth everybody's while here. We think we have a fun show planned. Let's start out with some headlines, shall we? Headline number one, Whoopi Goldberg apologizes for using Romani slur on The View. I'm really sorry, the moderator said after using the derogatory word when discussing Donald Trump losing the 2020 race. She said that he felt he got... Now, I didn't even know this was a slur, but...
I knew that.
You knew that the short for gypsy is a slur? Does that mean gypsy is a slur?
Yeah, you know why I knew that? Because there was a whole controversy in the theater community a few years ago. Because there was a very popular Facebook page, Gypsy Housing for Actors, who need some kind of transient place to stay, and they had to change the name to Ghost Light Housing.
See, I'll plead ignorance. I did not know that either. But she said, you know, when you're a certain age, you use words that you know from when you're a kid or you remember saying, and that's what I did. And I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have thought about it. I should have thought about it a little longer when I said it, but I didn't. What I meant to say was Trump felt he got Jewed. That's what I meant. I should have gone with that. But I didn't. Slip of the tongue, it slipped my mind. I apologize.
They were going to pay more, but they Jewed Trump down.
Right, exactly. That's what I meant.
That's what I
should have said. Yeah.
Okay, so as anyone who's watched the show regularly knows, I'm very skeptical of language policing, but I'm not categorically against the idea that certain words and phrases clearly have discriminatory connotations, and we need to update that. This is actually one of those cases, because the way that she used it, gypped, yes, of course that's discriminatory. You've taken this term for a group of people and made it synonymous with getting ripped off. So I don't actually disagree with banishing gypped from our language.
I had no idea. I had no idea there was any controversy around it. So,
I learned something
for a
too.
while. Yeah. It is funny though how quickly and emphatically she apologized for that when she has doubled and then since even tripled down a year later on her insistence that the Holocaust was not racially motivated. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
look at how she turned around and just emphatically came out, "I'm so sorry." Whereas when she said, "Oh, the Holocaust wasn't about race," then it was, "Well, when you think about it, if you're, if you're standing next to a Jewish person and the KKK comes walking, she had all these qualifiers, right? She tried to smooth that over as best she could. This one, she just, right away.
Well, I think the difference is with Gypped, she doesn't have any particular attachment to that, whereas what she said about Jews is what she actually believes. And you could tell in Whoopi's in the bowl of warm pudding that she calls a brain, she actually has thought about this,
Right?
and
right.
so she's kind of proud of this. That
Right.
she
With
came
this
up-
one, she
Yeah,
didn't
with
even
that-
really put it together.
Right. So she wasn't going to defend that. This wasn't some brilliant idea that came upon her at 2:00 in the morning, like the idea that the Holocaust wasn't about racism.
Exactly. All right, so this next quick headline here is a little bit of a victory lap for our friend Russell Dobular here. Disney's no good, very bad week at the box office. I have some slides I'll run down while he lays this out for you, because one of your predictions for 2023 was that it would be a rough year for Disney, correct?
That Disney was basically going to collapse this year. Okay, so all within the same week, rumors have emerged because they've pushed back the Marvels twice now. Now they pushed it back to November from July. And now rumors have come out that they didn't just push it back to do reshoots because it is screened terribly for test audiences, but also because Brie Larson is throwing a fit about the fact that she's kind of been sidelined in her own movie, probably because they didn't feel it was diverse enough. So they've introduced an African-American character and also Ms. Marvel from the TV series, which I believe was the worst rated of the Marvel TV series so far on Disney Plus. So that's really going to put the asses in the seats. So they keep pushing this back. Willow, which they put years of development and a lot of money into, that's just been canceled because that was another disaster. Ant-Man looks like it's going to be, if not the worst performing MCU movie amongst them. It had the biggest second week drop of any MCU release in their history. And the CEO Iger is really doing the the band playing on the deck of the Titanic thing. Yeah, no, maybe we're just doing too many sequels with the same characters. Maybe, we're going to introduce a lot of new characters, and we don't have a content problem. It's fine. Marvel is fine. Disney is fucked because they put an enormous amount of money into buying Lucasfilm. And that was the other thing. The Mandalorian season 3. That's had the worst viewership of anything except Andor. Now, Andor, for the geeks among you, that was actually good. That was actually a very adult take on the Star Wars universe. It was shockingly good, actually. To me, that series was, if the George Lucas that directed THX 1138 had been the George Lucas that showed up and directed Star Wars, that's what you would have gotten. This very interesting kind of atmospheric sci-fi. But no, Mandalorian has underperformed everything except for Andor. They put themselves in a trap. They spent a lot of money acquiring all these properties, including Pixar, which also has performed very badly under Disney's management. Disney has actually been beaten out on their animation for the last 3 years. They have not been able to claim the top slot in animated gross. So even with Pixar, even with their animation, even with their core business, they're tanking. They put a lot of money into buying these properties, and then to try to make that money back, they diluted the properties by putting out too much half-baked content, and they've destroyed the brands. Also, I mean, on the Marvel thing, you can only do this Avengers arc once. And trying to mine C-list and D-list characters and try to catch that same lightning in a bottle is just not going to work for them. So with all of the hundreds of millions of dollars they've spent on acquisitions under Iger, with this content tanking, Disney's going to be in a lot of trouble, like a lot of financial trouble.
Well, you're riding high now, so I'm going to have to, I'm sorry, perhaps take you down a peg, because another prediction that you made for 2023 was that the Russia-Ukraine war would sort of settle down by the summertime. That's looking a little less likely given this news here. Poland becomes the first NATO member to offer Ukraine fighter jets. Polish President Andrzej Duda said on Thursday that Poland will transfer 4 of its MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine in the coming days and plans to send others as well. The transfer would make Poland the first NATO member to answer Kyiv's call for aircraft to help it further prevent Russia from securing air superiority over Ukraine. The Ukrainian Air Force already operates MiG-29 jets, so they will likely be able to use the Polish aircraft right away. So there you go. NATO supplied aircraft into Ukraine. Another escalation. Obviously, it's a good thing future President Ron DeSantis is changing his tune on this, because this could get really out of control.
It is getting scary. As I recall, I'm going to have to go back and look at the tape. I was very iffy on that prediction. I wasn't as committed as I was to my Disney prediction, or my Ron DeSantis prediction. Although I don't know, it could happen. It could happen. It's interesting to me that when China proposed a peace plan, Zelensky didn't dismiss the idea out of hand. I mean, of course, he said, well, Russia has to leave and all of this. Also, remember, we're going into an election year. This war is becoming more and more unpopular. And Biden is going to be facing, we'll talk about it more in the DeSantis segment, Biden's going to be facing a GOP, it looks like, where other than Nikki Haley, who's not really a factor in the race.
Right. She's the Marianne of the Republicans.
Yeah, she's kind of a side note there, trying to get some attention for herself, but I don't think it's going to work. He's facing either opponent he faces is going to be a Ukraine skeptic, and that is the popular position. That's what's funny. Again, we're going to look at this more later. That's what's funny when you watch all of these elite pundits and politicians talking as if they're speaking for the American people when they're only really speaking for the arms industry. Nobody agrees with what you're with keeping us involved in this.
No, this could potentially be the first election in a very, very long time where war is an absolute liability for the incumbent party. That's very, very rare. Even when wars have been unpopular, they have not proven to be a liability. Even the Iraq War, George Bush won. You could say despite that, but perhaps because of that, right? I mean, there are a lot of people, even though popularity for that war, or I'm sorry, public sentiment for that war had been sliding, there was still enough jingoism, enough nationalism to push him over the top, especially since there was this meme of John Kerry being this weakling or this traitor with the Purple Hearts and all that shit. This could be the first time in a very long time where a current military conflict is a liability for the White House when they're seeking a second term.
Well, I think
if it's still going on by then. I mean, that's almost 2 years away.
Well, I think a big part of that is this is a war occurring at a time when faith in our institutions has completely collapsed.
Exactly.
What's more serious than war? So if you don't think the people who run your institutions are serious people, the last thing you want is them getting the country into a war.
Right. Of course. Of course. All right. Our final headline here before we start our main segment. This is also a foreign policy related headline, but a very, very important one. U.S. officials project calm as China stuns world with Iran-Saudi deal. The détente China brokered between Iran and Saudi Arabia is spurring breathless talk in some corners of a regional paradigm shift and even the rise of a Beijing-centric world order. The Biden administration's reaction, however, amounts to nothing to see here, folks. This is from Politico once again.
What? Me worry?
Yeah, exactly. U.S. officials have issued brief public statements that downplay the initiative. As for details in interviews, they argued that, among other things, it's a one-off case. It was in China's economic interest to broker the deal. It doesn't translate into long-term alliances, and anything that helps calm the region is in America's interest. Interesting that you would say anything that helps calm the region is in America's interest, because neither the Democrats nor the Republicans have had any real interest in doing that. Hopefully, what we see is a de-escalation of the Saudi war in Yemen, since the Saudi assault is on the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels there. So that could be progress. And it looks like this is part of a larger story of a multipolar world forming, where China replaces the U.S. As the most relevant superpower on Earth, especially since we stubbornly remain committed to this same strategy of just extended violent stalemate in Ukraine. I mean, we are not projecting seriousness in any direction on the world stage now.
When you look at the havoc that the United States has wreaked, it's across the world, it's no surprise that the majority of citizens around the world, and even in Western countries, consider the United States the greatest threat to world peace. Not Russia, not China, the United States. So when you think about what a Chinese world order looks like for countries like Saudi Arabia, for countries like India, for countries like South Africa, it's pretty attractive. You have a country that doesn't seem to have an interest in getting militarily involved in countries outside of its direct orbit, Taiwan, places like that, but doesn't seem to have any interest in doing a United States thing of hundreds of bases around the world. Like it's antithetical to their whole philosophy as a culture going back thousands of years to get involved in the world in that way. So now you've got this superpower that's really not interested in your internal affairs either. If you're an autocratic country, if you're they don't care, right? They're going to come in, they're going to do business with you. You want to hack up a journalist? That's your internal affair. You don't ask us what we're doing with our political prisoners, and we're not going to ask you what you're doing with your journalists. But you know what? This fighting is bad for business. It's bad for everybody. Let's have a sit down. You, Yemen, Iran, Saudi Arabia. That's a much more attractive vision than America with its hypocritical moral posturing coming in and calling you out for your internal affairs, while at the same time expecting a complete pass for America's own conduct around the world. So who do you want to do business with? America or China? We've done such a great job in that region in particular. Why wouldn't they go with China? Look, China and South Africa did joint exercises. You know, this is what we're looking at. A lot of the world would love to see the United States no longer have this dominant position. And we're seeing more and more as the U.S. loses credibility, as it loses power. You're seeing more and more countries that are ostensibly allied with us. So yeah, go fuck yourself. Right? Saudi Arabia is like, yeah, no, we're gonna get in bed with China at a moment when you're having particularly tense relations. Fuck you. We're gonna make peace with Iran. We're gonna do dealings with China. Same thing with India. They're buying all of this oil from Russia, and they basically told the United States, "Hey, we're a poor country, man. Like we're buying this oil. What are you going to do about it?" This is the shape of things to come. And once the dollar is removed as the reserve currency, Americans are going to find out very quickly how much we've been living off of the use of force and intimidation to support material conditions that our level of production does not actually justify.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. Well said. I wouldn't have taken that sip if I knew you were finishing at that instant. But, all right, we're going to admit our guests in just 1 second. We just got to plug our Patreon, patreon.com/do-dissidents if you would like to help support the show. Patreon supporters and paid Substack subscribers get bonus content, which we are going to be recording this week. We're a little behind on it this month because Russell's only been back for 1 week from India, but we are getting on that. You get 4 bonus videos a month, including, I already found our first bonus video. It's going to be Kamala Harris on the Stephen Colbert Show. What a rich segment that was. Unfortunately, the Colbert Show are total bitches about copyright. Like, they'll pull shit down. That's why
nobody does Colbert.
Right.
He's such an obvious target.
Such an obvious target for left media people. But when you put Colbert on, you a lot of times get the videos.
And right media people. They don't touch him either.
No, they don't touch him because CBS is really a bastard about that. But we'll be doing that. You get bonus videos and call-in access to these shows. Lots of new patrons to shout out since our last show here. We have Dirk, Automatic, Red Rebel D, Fujoshi C, Chet's Mom, and Chris Y just signed up about an hour ago. So thank you guys all very much. You guys should all be on the scroll if I did it correctly. The more people we get signed up at patreon.com, the more streams we can do.
The more we can make it rain at the Hustler Club.
Yeah, exactly. Convert that all into singles there. So Patreon donations, Patreon memberships rather, Substack memberships, and Super Chat donations all are a tremendous help. They keep the show going. They keep us able to devote the amount of time that we've been devoting to this, and hopefully, as we grow, we'll be devoting even more. There are our final patrons on the scroll, new additions for the week. Thank you guys, of course.
This isn't a Super Chat, but it opens up a couple things based on comments that we've been getting on videos that I do actually want to comment on briefly, quickly. All right, so the Politico hit piece on Marianne proves she is a real threat, according to Kyle Klinsky. All right, so yeah, that's pretty funny. I want to clarify a couple things. I can't speak for Keaton here. All right, so Crystal Ball, I don't think she's a dishonest actor, and I still think that Breaking Points is the best show in its class. And as I thought would probably be the case, Sagar's not having that shit. They're not talking. She's not talking this shit on that show. She's only talking that in segments that she does off of Breaking Points. I don't think she's a dishonest actor. I think her political vision is limited by her wealth and her class. And I still think that she does a lot of good work. Marianne Williamson, I would pretty much say the same thing. I don't think she's ill-intentioned. I think her vision is limited by her class and her wealth. Same thing. I don't think she's going in there trying to sell books. I don't think that's what it's about.
No, I mean, she's going to sell fewer books now than she would have before. I mean, the book is marketed to libs, right? I mean, who else is going to buy Marianne Williamson's book but a lib? So she's going to sell fewer books. As for Crystal, man, I don't know. I think you're being a little generous. I can't believe someone as smart as her wouldn't know that this is a boondoggle going in. But anyway,
I think she's worked herself up to believe her own bullshit.
All right, well, can't prove it either way, I suppose. But anyway, we are going to get to our super chats in a little bit, but we have some guests that we're keeping waiting, and it's very important that we get to them. So I want to right now admit from a wonderful new social media venture. They're on Twitter, but it's also a Facebook group, a fast-growing Facebook group, which is great to see, called United for East Palestine, a great sort of mutual aid network that is forming online. We are here with two of the admin / moderators, forces behind that group. We have Alex Felix and Jenna Gianos. I hope I got your last name right, Jenna. Was that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, beautiful. Alex, just hit that unmute button, bud, when you can. Don't worry. Perfect. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate you guys coming on. We've been trying to cover the East Palestine disaster as best we can and as often as we can on the show. I said as soon as this happened, this is the kind of thing that independent media has to stay on, because if we don't nobody will. And it's great to see a Facebook group form for this mutual aid purpose, because as much as we all, I'm sure, are familiar with how social media can sort of be a vessel for our angers and our hatreds and our resentments and our frustrations, it's nice to see social media can also be a vessel for empathy and compassion, love, and solidarity, which is what you guys are doing. So do you guys want to talk first about who you are and where you're from? Jenna, I understand you live fairly close to the affected town. And then Alex, you're from Vegas, correct? You guys can go in whichever order you'd like.
Yeah, so I live in Boardman, Ohio, which I'm about 12 miles out from the derailment site specifically. The Facebook group we created initially, I think before we really knew what was actually going on. People were being evacuated. They needed some resources. We wanted to make sure they had clean water. That was kind of where it all started, and it grew more rapidly than I could have ever expected. I thought maybe we'd get a good 300 people, and now we're at, I think we're over 8,000 members from across the country, which has been really cool. It's actually how I met Alex. So Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I just sort of wound up on the page because I follow, I'm a solidarity member with United for the Railroad Workers United, and I get their newsletter. So I found out about this pretty early on, and I was just interested in trying to help with organizing, mutual aid. And so I reached out on the Facebook group, and that's how Emily and Jenna and I met, and we kind of formed a team and just have been working with really awesome people like Professor Andrew Welton from Purdue University, Aaron Bragg, big ups to Aaron Bragg, who lives in the area too, has a property of 500 feet away from the derailment site. Dr. Beatrice Galam, who is a very highly respected medical researcher. She was she's kind of like the main scientist who proved the the United States' culpability in Gulf War illness and how they were causing that to happen to soldiers during the Gulf War. And she reached out to sort of mainline the medical research on this, all on a volunteer basis. One of the big things we're doing now is trying to raise funding for these ventures. Just an example, Professor Welton came to East Palestine for a day and a half, took some samples, and then the second half of his team came the next weekend, and they're $25,000 in the hole now. So, there's a bad need for funding to get this done, and it's important that it does because within days of him posting that he was doing that, the EPA finally released they were going to have Norfolk Southern test for dioxins, and they released a statement telling people to get the creeks literally the day after Professor Welton said that he was there and documented that he was there and told them that they needed to. So there is a lot of power in having these types of people with, real credentials and real respect in that academic community being able to do this, and they can do that if they have the funding to do so.
Yeah, and on top of that, it just seems like people are able to communicate with each other, organize and promote town halls in the area. I just saw a post earlier about a naturopathic wellness center having a health and wellness workshop that people can go to there, sort of, promoting that on the group. Information about how you can get dioxins tested in your home, information about water bottles. I saw, picture of a van full of water bottles being sent into town where people can go and get access to that. So it's just, it's a fantastic resource. My wife is she's part of a lot of, traffic and weather groups locally where people alert themselves to different things. That's one of the things that Facebook can be a great tool for. So it is really this great sort of mutual aid community for people who live in the area. But then, like you said, when it comes to fundraising efforts and things like that, anybody can join from anywhere and make a big difference by going on there. So, I encourage everybody who's on Facebook to absolutely join that group. The link is in the description of the video. So can you talk about, sorry, Russell, go ahead.
And that's what's really important about efforts like this. We've been having, speaking of Marianne, we've been having a big conversation in the online left about nihilism versus political electioneering and whether it's an either or choice. And this is an example of what you can do. of actually getting involved in a cause outside of electoral politics. Whether you want to get involved in electoral politics, that's up to you. That's a separate thing. But without this, that is kind of meaningless, I would say, without these efforts. That's
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
that's what I got.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a super important thing. And so, do you know roughly, I mean, it's tough to track exactly, but do you know how many people from the East Palestine area are involved in the group and how much sort of on the ground work is happening as a result of this? Because it seems pretty active to me on the page.
Yeah. I know, I'm not sure how many people from the group are in the area. I think it would be kind of hard to tell. Or maybe we have a few data scientists, maybe they can decipher it somehow. But I think we have a pretty big following from the area because it's been an area that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. Most of the aid that's been provided has been from outside the area. So like trucks from Pennsylvania, like like everywhere across the country have like shipped. There were Amazon wish lists and stuff. And we've been partnering with some of the local nonprofits that are in the area to provide distribution for a lot of these goods since, like I said earlier, we didn't realize how big it would become and how much of a fight it would become for the residents that are there. I know like I said, I live 12 miles away and you would think nothing happened. Or people think I'm crazy for wanting to help. They're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, like in reality, it impacts all of us because dioxins don't just stay in a 1 mile radius or, and the water doesn't just stay in that area. Our entire community is impacted, but also, that area, like they have dire need right now. There are people that are sick. They need help. They need relocated permanently. They can't go back to their homes. So I think like that's where we've been focused on getting the right testing, getting in contact with the right people that can help make some real change, whether it's extending the voluntary evacuation area that's there right now. It's about a mile radius, and giving them the proper tests. We have people waiting weeks to have their wells tested, like weeks. So in the meantime, they're either buying their own bottled water. Hopefully they're coming to grab some. It's like there's people that don't have cars, think of your grandmother, like having to go get cartons of water. It's really unfortunate that people have to deal with this, all because it's about profits of a train company, because God forbid they would not go through there. They would lose money. So
what do we know about toxins on the ground? What do we know? Do we have real lab results of what the area's toxicity is?
I'll let Alex take that one.
Yeah. So we have Professor Weldon has put out some preliminary results. We've also gotten some preliminary results from a few other labs that we weren't specifically working with, so the veracity of them is kind of hard to tell. But we do have a lot of reports saying that the chemicals that we know there are dioxins. We have lab results demonstrating that those results that there is like basically every kind of type of dioxin that exists is in the water and the soil. We know that the test the EPA took. Now the problem with the test Norfolk Southern took and the EPA is touting as proving that things are safe, which is happening from the perspective of one being very flawed for where it was tested. What they test wasn't like anybody's home or the soil or soot on their cars. What they tested was the debris from the landfill that they had put into this dump site from the train derailment site, and they tested that, outside with like no transparency, like no real, no eyes on them of how they're testing their methodology, etc. But even that test, it showed that every type of dioxin is there. They say within the safe levels, but when they mean safe levels, the levels that are according to the CDC and the CDC, the CDC will allow at a dump site, not in a residence, not where someone lives.
Right.
Website, which is different. They don't talk about any of that. So there was just a lot of skullduggery in regards to how things are happening on that side. But Professor Welton his team has put out preliminary results. They haven't finished testing for dioxins because those tests are much more expensive, like thousands of dollars per sample. But we do know that what he has been able to prove is that the test panels that they were doing for these tests, one of the reasons they were so flawed is because what they were doing was they were just kind of testing for like a random spectrum of chemicals with no like rhyme or reason. And so Professor Welton on his Twitter, which I highly recommend you follow, the Welton group on Twitter, what he showed is that they were because they were just testing for random chemicals and saying, well, we have this and this, there's no rhyme or reason. So what his central position is, in order to do this, what you have to do is test for literally everything first, right, at the sites where we know there's contamination. And then once you have an idea of what chemicals to look for, then you test for those chemicals. And that's what they haven't been doing. So, and what he did was he did a kind of what he called a kitchen sink test, which is testing for literally everything. He's put out some preliminary results showing that there are very dangerous chemicals and very dangerous high amounts that were not shown on the chemicals pattern that was put out by the EPA and Norfolk Southern because they weren't testing for them. And so one of his big positions is we have to test for everything first, and then once we know what to look for, then we can look for those.
Yeah, and then you can trace the amounts if they stay the same, if they go down. Obviously, that's a very time-intensive process, and the way you are describing it makes it sound like that costs quite a bit of money as well. So it's a long haul kind of thing, and that brings me to my next question here, which is you guys have obviously been involved in this firsthand, since the crash happened. We've been doing our best to cover it as closely as we can since it happened, but I noticed in the first couple of weeks since the crash, the information came to me. I didn't have to look very far. And now I can see, just 6 weeks later, it's more of a struggle to find information about this, to find news about this, to find coverage about this. And these are where, these weeks here are critical, because this is where it's no longer front page news, but you can't let it fall out of the cycle entirely. So how have you guys seen this covered in media? And how big an obstacle has that been to growing the group? Obviously, you guys have already grown it beyond where you thought it would. Is it slowing down? Is it picking up? Are people choosing to engage in this way, despite the fact that it's sort of falling out of front page news or top story on? Well, it was actually never really top story on CNN, but now that it is not as hot a topic anymore, is that becoming an obstacle, or do you, in your experience, are people remaining engaged and actually increasing their level of awareness?
From the Facebook group perspective, it's dwindled quite a bit. We were gaining like 500 followers or members a day, and now that's what we're averaging a week. From like a relief effort, I probably get one person every 3 days that's asking to donate something, and directing them of where to donate. So it's definite versus like I was overwhelmed and didn't know what to do with anything. There were, I would say, about 3 weeks out, we got a whole week of really good press coverage from national news. I think I was on Fox, CNN, News Nation, something else. I don't know, multiple places. Like I was like so overwhelmed with interviews. And now nobody's reached out at all. Like it's just been independent media that's been covering it. And I think that's really thanks to, people like you. Alex reaches out to a lot of independent media as well, based upon some of the shows he listens to. Somebody commented it's still a big local story. I think it's local to like that specific area. I don't think it's covering the surrounding communities at all. So it's definitely fallen off, but we still are getting a steady following, just not quite as big as we probably need it to be.
Yeah, I know, because I noticed, like, I saw a couple of posts of, like, there's a family in Cincinnati that has a trailer that can house a couple families worth of people, and so they'll post that, so if people need a place to stay, if they can't stay at their home and they can't afford a hotel, they can go. And so, like, that's an area where, yeah, obviously it's most relevant to people who live in the area, and obviously the closer you are to the town itself, the more impacted you are by it. but there's ways for people to get involved and help, from all over the place, whether it's donations or even if you live a few hours out of town, if you have space that you can put a family up who needs it, that's a huge help. I mean, that could be a lifeline. I mean, we saw a video of the town hall that guy, saying I got a family of 5, crammed onto whatever it was. I think his brother-in-law's bed or something like that. Because people just have no place to go. And so before we let you guys go, do you want to, obviously the link is in the description of the video, but you guys are on Twitter as well. And I don't worry, I'll toss to Russell too. Go ahead.
I want to ask, since we have somebody living in the area here, was there any reaction there to Joy Behar blaming the residents for the way they vote?
Yeah. I mean, a lot. Yeah. I mean, that town, it seems, I mean, my assumption, and I don't know, Alex, if you want to chime in, seems to be a pretty heavy Trump supporting town. And we know Joy is not. And so for some reason, she seems to blame that vote on Biden's response. I don't know how that really correlates. Each person has an opportunity to change regulations if they disagree, right? And we haven't seen that happen. So whose vote is it?
He had 2 years to do.
And it's a people problem. It's bipartisan. It has nothing to do with like how it's being made into some political circus in general. Everybody wants to blame somebody else, but in reality, Norfolk Southern supports both political parties.
Right.
So they can deregulate the crap out of things and make profit. So.
And we just had Biden shut down a railroad strike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to that point, a couple points I just wanted to address. The one point in terms of getting people offering their homes to people, one that's super generous. We have we have a whole pin post for people offering housing. But the thing is, people need to be evacuated. They at the very least need the option to be evacuated. And I don't mean a 1 mile zone. We have data. It's from an informal survey, and we're a very small team, only what we'll be able to gather. But from the data we have pretty steady showings of toxic chemical exposure injury 10 miles out from the derailment site. We have people who have been reporting terrible lung injuries, vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, migraines, for a long way out. And that's just the acute stuff. And the reality is, a lot of people don't necessarily want to go live in someone's house because there's all kinds of problems that can occur with. I mean, it's great and generous, but if you don't know someone and you're going to those houses, I mean, I'm not discouraging you from doing that, but I'm saying the reality is there's a lot of variables there that a lot of people feel leery about, and they need the option to be able to evacuate safely and in a way that leaves them financially whole, at the very least not worse off than they were before. And that is fundamentally what is not happening. And the reason why it's not happening is because the government is running cover for Norfolk Southern and protecting them from culpability and responsibility for the damage they're doing to people's lives, to their health, and to their financial. When Jenna went on to CNN, they brought a man to the panel who can't even retire now because his home value is worth absolutely nothing now.
Right.
These are the kind of people that Norfolk Southern needs to be paying out. And the main problem is what we found.
They're too busy bailing out SVB.
Yeah, and what we found is that we were trying to raise funds to get people evacuated, but what we found is that it's impossible to raise that much money. At least for us, it would be like millions and millions of dollars just to get started. And what we found is that the fastest route to do that is to prove there's a problem, because that's the biggest thing, is they're gaslighting everybody about how dangerous this is, what chemicals there are. And that's why they're getting away with not evacuating people. So the only way we can stop that is by getting real, independent, rigorously tested science and data showing that there's a problem. And then by doing that, we can then force the government to then force Norfolk Southern or whoever is responsible to get people out of there. And I think that's the main reason why, or our main goal is to get people out of there. And what we found out is that seems to be the quickest strategy to do so.
Well, that's a hugely important point. It sounds like what you're saying is that denying that there's a problem there and suggesting that it's safe to be there is what is a way of sort of stopping that first domino from falling. Because once you accept that there's a problem, well, now you have to deal with the problem and all of the implications of that problem, which, as you just articulated, there are a few of them, are far more than what initially meet the eye, right? What about home values, right? What about travel expenses for people to leave and come back? What about job losses, right? What about school systems, right? How are the schools going to handle any sort of depopulation if it's permanent? Is there going to be the same demand for teachers? What's going to happen to the teachers if there are no longer, if there are no longer enough people in the town? These are all questions that all stem from acknowledgement that this is not a safe place to be. It sounds like that's
it really does illustrate how when average people need something from the government, it's a struggle. And when a bank needs something, wow, man, they were on that lickety split. Wow, what did that take? A day? And they had everybody's deposits covered. I am sure that to bail out this entire town would cost a fraction of what they had to put into bailing out that bank. You're talking about billions of dollars. That bank had $208 billion in deposit, most of which was not insured. And they can't bail these people out on their property. They can't bail these people out on
have
their
you guys
houses.
seen any chatter about that? Have people been talking
This
about
isn't
that? Because
Midtown
this, to
Manhattan. I mean, what could the houses cost there?
No, of course.
It like if you look at the community demographics, I think there's like a median income of like $45,000.
Yeah.
There's the percentage of secondary education is in the single digits past high school. So like we're not talking about mansions for the majority that we would have to buy out. They are average homes. They are good working people. They've worked their asses off to have what they have, and in the fact that they now have to choose to like keep working and pay off a house that's worth nothing. Like it's just broken. Like that's the American dream now. And if this would have happened in probably any other city major city, the response would have been very different. And yeah, it's broken. In the Silicon Valley Bank presidents or CEOs, like they get fired and Alan Shaw just gets to chill being a millionaire.
Yeah. Well, even the depositors, I mean, we're going to talk about this in our last segment, obviously, but this is where you have the reality set in amongst people, mostly, I shouldn't say mostly, but certainly disproportionately in the middle of the country, the upper Midwest, the Rust Belt, right? Who just feel like there are just two different realities in this country. Like even a lot of people who are having the debate, should we or should we not have bailed out the depositors of SVB, who are, of course, disproportionately, Silicon Valley startups and things like that. When you talk about backing them up and bailing them out, you're talking about sums of money in excess of $250,000 because the first $250,000 is already insured by the FDIC. So you're talking about right before you even have the conversation, you're talking about people who most people in this country, and certainly a vast, vast, vast majority of people in East Palestine, Ohio, would already consider rich before you even start the conversation. We're talking about people's $250,000 and first dollar here. Whereas the idea of having that kind of money in the bank is completely foreign to so many people who are affected by this thing here. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, what country is there? It's not really a country anymore. It's not a civilization anymore. It's not a society anymore.
Well, it's the same with law enforcement. There's really no meaningful enforcement of white collar crime, even though it's usually far more damaging to far more people than the kinds of crimes we do prosecute. Who did more damage? The bankers who wiped out pensions for a generation in 2008, who didn't do a day in jail, or the guy who robs the corner store who's going to do years in prison for that? Mm-hmm. Who should be in prison?
And speaking of prison, and it's not, this isn't a white collar crime. This is just a felony, a violent felony by any stretch, but it's still being protected because Norfolk Southern. We're looking at violent crimes. There's so much to look into, and I encourage everybody to go to our Twitter page because we've done a lot of work in kind of showing this out. But we're talking about aggravated arson, which is a felony. We're talking about poisoning, which is a felony. We're talking about conspiracy to conceal a felony, which is a felony. With multiple people, we're talking about people from the CEO of Norfolk Southern, the governor of Ohio, people in the EPA, anybody who has participated and who can be shown to be participating in the actions of covering this up and knowingly doing so is committing a felony. This is not a white collar crime. This is a violent crime. And these are the sort of things that can be prosecuted in criminal court. I think one of the biggest failings that's happening right now is Governor DeWine put out that the AG is pursuing a civil case against him. Okay, fine, but this is not a civil case. Poisoning someone is a felony. That's a crime. That's criminal. That's not just suing them because they pay money. People should go to prison for this. And not that I'm necessarily for the prison system, but if we're going to have any kind of accountability, then people who are participating in actually poisoning people and actually harming people on an industrial scale, we're talking about just people inside the zip code of East Palestine. We're talking that we have people who are reporting credibly showing with like chemical samples they're showing people are getting sick all the way in Ontario, Canada. There were viral videos and that they suppressed them, but there was a large number of videos on TikTok and people in Ontario, Canada showing snow melt with the exact same kind of chemical sheen that we were seeing in rivers and creeks around East Palestine. So this is a level of chemical poisoning on a scale that is not being talked about by anyone because they're suppressing it. And it's a shame that we're not seeing anybody in the media talking about this because we're just a small team, yet we're able to see there's people in Cincinnati, people in Connecticut, people in Ontario, Canada, upstate New York.
My area right here in the Hudson Valley, about 2 weeks after that happened, there was a weird perfume smell in the air. I have a horrible sense of smell, so I didn't smell it. My wife smelled it. She went on to the Hudson Valley weather. They were reporting that people were sensing that, people, itchy eyes, a weird sort of like chemical sort of, they said it smelled like a perfume kind of thing. We don't know. I mean, we're a few hundred miles east of here. Jet stream blows that way. Who knows? Not saying it came from there, but that was on people's mind. Absolutely.
If I could say almost certainly, we actually have High Split, which is a state of the art projection model for dispersion of particulate and showing that we actually have a pretty good idea. I mean, there's a lot more data we can plug in, but you can go to our Twitter and see there's people who have been doing work to show where this went, and that's exactly where it went. And it's not just like anecdotal evidence. We have a vast amount of data, which is one of the reasons for the things we're also trying to fund is because we have a team of people who are very learned in data entry and AI who are capable of actually putting together a model for how these are being distributed. We need to know these things because anybody who has smelled these chemicals is being exposed to them, and we don't even know what chemicals they are. We don't know what sort of acute or long-term injuries can happen from being exposed to these chemicals. We don't even know what chemicals they were exposed to. So there's a huge amount of of science and testing that needs to be done that is not being done, and that's what they want. They want all of the snow to melt. They want all of it to go into the river. They want all of it to break down, so that way they can't prove anything. Because once you can't prove anything, there's no crime. And so it's so important to get this data so we have the evidence so we can show this isn't just something about them paying out money, which they need to do, obviously, make people whole. This is a crime. This happened on a gigantic scale to the point where it would be considered a war crime if they did it if it was one nation that did it to another nation. That would be a war crime. But because they're doing it to people, and Norfolk Southern is doing it to people, and they're running cover for it, they're doing these things with expectation of receiving absolutely no accountability. And I don't think that's acceptable. I don't care where you sit on political, philosophical, any kind of spectrum. If we, as you said, if we're going to have a functional society, that can't happen.
Right. No, absolutely. 100%. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We put your Twitter handle in the chat here. The link to your Facebook group is in the description. Before you go, any final plugs where people can get in touch, how they can get involved? Because I think it's very important that they do.
Yeah, I mean, I can say we have a bunch of organizations linked, as well as our donor box, right, is for independent science funding. So that will be up on our Facebook page. I don't think it's on there now. We've really pushed it on Twitter and not really there. So we're gonna.
It's on our page, not our group, but it's on there.
Yeah. So it's on Facebook. It's also on Twitter. So that's a really solid way to help if you're not near. If you are near, we've linked a couple nonprofits that are accepting like physical donations as well.
Awesome. Yeah, DM me all that stuff because I'm going to clip this segment and post it probably tomorrow. So I'll put all those links on that video as well.
If I can just quickly say also, if you
course.
go to the donor box, you will see a link to a spreadsheet where we have put the budget. So any money that is spent from the fund will be put on the budget for complete transparency so everybody can see how every dollar is spent.
Beautiful.
Okay, great.
Well, guys, thank you so much. It was great to meet you. We will be in touch for sure. We'd love to talk to you again sometime as well. Jenna and Alex, thank you so much. Great work. And we hope everybody gets involved.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a great night, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks again. All right. Jenna Gianos and Alex Felix. Great work there. That's, like I said, online left curmudgeons that we all are. It's nice to see the internet being used for something good.
Well,
that's the bright side of social media right there.
Well, and that's the point of having a platform like this to me. I mean, as I said, we're having a big conversation now about, well, what do you do? If you're going to have a whole election cycle where there's no one for you to support, what outside, third parties and such, but you're not going to get involved in Democratic Party politics. What do? Here's something you can do.
Of course.
And believe me, it's going to be a lot more effective than knocking on doors for Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, no, 100%. Absolutely. Like check, everybody. Like check. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button if this is your first time here. Thank you guys very much for watching. We have a few more segments to get to, obviously. We talked a little bit of foreign policy in the headline segments, and we have some more to get to here. So Tucker Carlson recently issued a questionnaire to various declared and undeclared sort of potential Republican 2024 presidential candidates. Most notably, he asked about their stances on the Russia-Ukraine war. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's likely going to enter the race in the spring or the summer, gave the following response to Tucker's questionnaire here. So they submitted the questions in writing, and then the candidates or would-be candidates wrote back. So the question here, is opposing Russia in Ukraine in America's interest? And Meatball Ron answers here, while the U.S. has many vital national interests, securing our borders, addressing the crisis of readiness within our military, achieving energy security and independence, and checking the economic, cultural, and military power of the Chinese Communist Party, becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia is not one of them. The Biden administration's virtual blank check funding of this conflict for as long as it takes, without any defined objectives or accountability, distracts from our country's most pressing challenges. So this marks a considerable pivot because many of DeSantis's detractors argued that he's not going to be able to shake his sort of affiliations with the sort of interventionist neocon wing of the GOP. And we have been on the forefront, or the vanguard, if you will, of insisting that he is capable of making such a pivot, and that he most likely will. And Russ, you were on this before I was, since you've been on the DeSantis train. Not that you're rooting for him, but you've been predicting that he's going to do very, very well for a long time. And it seems now that that pivot is here. Now, before we give our takes on this, we do have to, of course, give some reactions from the neocon news network known as MSNBC. It's not even a liberal media outlet anymore. It's basically a Bush-Lincoln Project Republican network right now.
MSNBC and CNN, for that matter, it's really what the intelligence services started plotting for in the 70s. There's very infamous internal documents that leaked where they literally planned the future we're living in now, where they're going to get much more involved in influencing the media. we're here. I mean, it's so out in the open. They're hiring these goons.
Right. Exactly.
As they're comment, you're literally hiring people from the intelligence agencies to comment on the intelligence agencies and international geopolitics. I mean, it's a fucking joke. It's a joke. Like if in the basement of CIA headquarters you had a news network, this is what it would look like.
Yeah. And, not only people from the IC, but obviously military higher-ups as well. So here is General Barry McCaffrey, who, by the way, in the year 2000, Seymour Hersh accused of committing war crimes. In a 2000 article that Seymour Hersh put out, he basically accused this guy of firing on Iraqi civilians who were fleeing after a ceasefire was declared in the first Gulf War. People are saying that, people are saying that. That's all we could say about that. But here he is.
That is not a resume killer at MSNBC.
No, right, exactly. It's not that they didn't know that. That's something easily overlooked over there.
He probably has this in his special skills.
Yeah, right, exactly. Murdering, fleeing Arabs. Right, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So here he is, very disappointed because don't forget, a lot of these military-type conservatives and neocon Republicans, they were getting, they were looking forward to backing DeSantis. Jeb Bush already came out and backed him. Like, they were really looking forward to getting at least not the whole sort of old-school Bush-era GOP package there, but at least they thought they were going to get that foreign policy back if they backed Ron, and they feel really burned by this. You could tell. Here's Barry McCaffrey lamenting this pivot on MSNBC here.
The only thing I would disagree with is that this is ignorance. I think Governor DeSantis deliberately, knowingly attacking to the far right to pick up Trump wing nuts in the primary election season. He's very well educated, very knowledgeable, a veteran, worked with Navy SEALs on deployment. He knew exactly what he was doing, and what he's
a torturer. We expect better from torturers. He's a bloodthirsty megalomaniac, whack job, a violent psychotic. We really expected more from him on this. Really upset.
We invited him into the inner sanctum with the robes and the daggers and the livestock.
Yeah,
and this is the thanks we get.
Yeah, exactly. Just, what a spit in the face.
He did massive damage to U.S. solidarity with NATO interests in Europe and our own national security interests. And he told the Russians, hang in there. It's quite likely all we got to do is endure for another 24 months, and these people will be ours. Following which, we will see threats to the Baltic republics, Poland, Romania, you name it. So it was a
Baseless
terrible statement. He knew what he was doing. His political insiders will say, well, come on, the general election will tack to the center. But this is serious damage he just did to the United States.
Okay, so tack to the center.
Did you hear? Ron DeSantis says he's not vital national interest. We just have to hang on 24 more months.
He says two things there that are shocking. I mean, he says a few other things that are shocking, but the main takeaways from there, he starts out referring to the sort of anti-interventionist base of the Republican Party as the Trump wingnuts, the far-right wingnuts. Right. And then he ends it by saying perhaps in a general election he'll tack back to the center. Right. What these guys don't understand is that DeSantis's position and Trump's position, for that matter, they are the center. Right. In fact, Trump's is actually closer to the center than Ron's still. I mean, DeSantis gave a very, very tepid answer there. He could have gone a lot further than he did. Trump basically saying, let's wrap this up within 24 hours. That's actually the center. Now, DeSantis is closer to the center now than he was a few weeks ago, but he is tacking to the center. You guys are the ones on the extreme. People don't want World War III. World War III is an extreme position to advocate. I don't know if you understand that. But like nuclear Armageddon, that's somewhat of a fringe idea to most people. Most people aren't for that.
I mean, fans of the Mad Max franchise.
Yeah. And Rachel Maddow viewers. That's the cross section.
And Rachel
there.
Maddow viewers. Yeah, there's some Venn diagram
Yeah,
overlap there.
exactly. Yeah.
They were really looking forward to having a candidate they could, posture against Trump. And
Of course.
all of this.
That was
But
the
when
whole plan.
and he just blew it because he's a smart politician and he knows he needs Trump's people more than he needs them, because people fucking hate them. In fact, for Ron DeSantis, the more they hate him, the more formidable he will be in a Republican primary. The last thing he wants is ghouls like Barry McCaffrey coming on there and speaking of him approvingly. That will be the kiss of death for his campaign. The more he
notice
they don't they are such an out of touch aristocracy. They just don't understand how hated they are. And when they talk about the center, and we learned this a long time ago. I mean, this is going back to the Sanders primaries. Like when they say the center, what they're talking about is elite opinion. They're not talking about any kind of measurement of public sentiment. Public sentiment is almost always completely divorced from what they're calling the center, which is actually the opinion of themselves and their elite class.
No, certainly. And you notice when it comes to DeSantis trying to get on the bad side of guys like this, you could see that in his complete non-response to the Jeb Bush endorsement. He did not say a single word after Jeb Bush endorsed him. Not a tweet. Thank you, Jeb, for we really great.
That's all. That's the last person he needs endorsing.
Exactly.
Him
it's like just keeps totally mum. Just act like that never happened. Forget about it. Don't make a thing out of it. No, he's shrewd enough to know what friends he needs and what enemies he needs.
Yep.
And so that really says something. All right, we have one more.
Having Morning Joe screaming about him being a Putin puppet, that's the best thing for his presidential campaign he could ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this next piece on that we're going to play from MSNBC, this is very, very short. This quite doesn't have the mass appeal. This is for the real MSNBC diehards who are still so bitter about the night of November 8th, 2016, when Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. Of course, who's top 5 to blame for that? Jill Stein. Here's Claire McCaskill.
Of course, yeah.
Pulling the old Jill Stein card out of the bottom of the deck here, trying to smear Big Ron that way. Yeah, exactly.
This one gave me member berries.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta tell you, somebody told me before this whole thing started that Ron DeSantis would end up being besties with Jill Stein. I would say, no, I don't think that's going to happen, because it turns out he's got Jill Stein and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, no, the person we should be getting political advice from is the person who would have been I believe she would have been a one-termer, except the gods gave her an opponent who began to talk about how in a legitimate rape, a woman's body can prevent pregnancy. That was the only, she was going to lose that race.
I think she is a one-termer. Wasn't she elected in 2012, or was she elected in 06?
No. I think that was I'm almost positive that was her second. Yeah, that was her. That was her second term, and she only won. She was in trouble in that race until this guy goes out there and talks about how a woman's body can shut down legitimate rape, pregnancy, and legitimate rape. That was the only reason she won that race. And then the next race, she wasn't gifted a fucking lunatic as an opponent, or at least not one who would say something like that in public, and she went down in a ball of flames. This is the kind of political mind that they hire to do color commentary on MSNBC, where she often gives advice that people should run like she ran and lost and barely squeaked by against a maniac the second time that she ran.
Yeah, no, I mean, and just that reference there, like that is clearly to the MSNBC diehards. Oh yeah, because they're the only ones who are going to think when you hear Jill Stein's name, Putin puppet. Because the MSNBC viewer, when they hear Jill Stein, they hear Putin puppet. Most people, when they hear Jill Stein, they think, who's that? And then some think, oh, Green Party candidate. But no, they have it so wired in their head. Jill Stein's doing the bidding of the Russian state. Therefore, now DeSantis is on the same page as Jill Stein, which he still is not even close. Like, DeSantis is not anywhere near what I would consider to be the appropriate position on this, which, oddly enough, I'm sorry, is Donald Trump's position of, yeah, first thing on the list, broker a peace deal. I can get it done within 24 hours. Not saying he could do that or is going to do that, but that's the right position, is within 24 hours of having the power to end this peacefully, you do it. That's not what DeSantis is saying.
We have the
He's
power.
saying it can't be a blank check.
We have the power to end this at any time. You make one phone call to Zelensky. You say, listen, you're sitting down with Putin and we're making peace. Otherwise, you're on your own.
And that's it.
War over.
Right, it's done.
Over.
Exactly.
All of his we will not accept, that's going to go out the window very quickly when he's no longer getting our munitions. And this is a story CBS tried to tell, and it got shut down. The story will come out one day about how many tens and hundreds of millions of American dollars wound up going into the pockets of the corrupt Ukrainian government and military, because we keep sending money over there and they keep needing more munitions. They keep needing more ammunition. Where's it going? And when we asked to have audits, that was rejected. Why? Why do you reject audits? If everything is on the up and up in the most corrupt country in Europe, then why can't we do audits on this? Eventually, the story is going to be told, and we're going to find out these weapons were going in the front door and they were getting sold out the back door.
Exactly. All right. Now, there's another component that Russell wants to touch on while we are on the topic of Ron DeSantis. We're going to do that in just a moment, but we did forget to go to our super chats in between segments, so I apologize for keeping you guys waiting. Can't keep the customers waiting too long. Grats on 6K. Thank you, Tusker. Appreciate that. And don't forget to hit the like button. Yes, please do hit that like button. Now we got a crowd filing in here. Thank you guys very much. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button as well. Cool Blue, thank you for the $9.99. Disney bombing, Warner Brothers taking apart HBO Max, Pac-12 losing teams in its conference. Is that are you talking about? See, now I'm going to embarrass myself. Is that the March Madness thing? I know that started today. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. I don't really follow college sports terribly closely. RSN's bailing and Bally Sports bankruptcy. May it be people via inflation and underpay find them unworthy? Well, I think the inflation definitely played a part because of the raised interest rates and the inflation. Yes. That's what made a lot of investors nervous about SVB in the first place. In fact, there are some people who have posited the theory that the whole thing was an overreaction, that it was a panic to the idea that, some investors got a little scared, and then that just snowballed into everybody pulling out once they saw that initial decrease.
I'll get into this more in the banking segment, but a lot of what's happening throughout the economy right now is ever since 2008, interest rates have been kept artificially low. Our entire economy has been built on low interest rates, and that's what's allowed a lot of corporations and a lot of companies to spend money very frivolously because money has been cheap, right? That's why they've been able to have the espresso makers and the Japanese steak and the ping pong foosball room, and they've been able to afford all of that. They've been able to afford a lot of employees that apparently they didn't need, given that they're slashing tens of thousands of jobs in the tech sector right now. Money's been cheap for a really long time. And what you're starting to see is businesses that have been heavily reliant on an economy with easy money and cheap credit are going to, some of them are going to go bankrupt. I mean, if the government lets them go bankrupt. This is just the beginning. And the real question right now is, what does Powell do? Does this scare Powell enough to stop raising interest rates? And if he does, is he between a rock and a hard place? Does the inflation, which has been gradually coming down, shoot right back up? There are just no good solutions here, because we probably kept credit cheap for way too long. And now that's distorted all of these asset classes. It's distorted housing. It's distorted the stock market. It's distorted crypto, which I still consider monopoly money. So yeah, I mean,
look, in a sense, what look like crashes and major disruptions could be, and this sounds scary, and I guess it is in a certain sense, it could be the process of a leveling out.
Well, you're unwinding this distortion.
Right, because you're going to have to level out eventually, which is what a lot of people have been saying for a long time. That process is not going to be pretty. There are going to be losers in it, know. The alternative is to keep it going forever. But that's a fantasy. That is a fantasy.
Well, that's just you're hoping that you can just keep printing money and have an underlying economy that is really not producing a goods and services commensurate with the money flowing through the economy. Can you keep an economy like that going forever? Probably not.
You might be able to keep it going until there's an extinction level weather events, which, given, the state of the environment, that might be the plan. Just keep this going until a major climate event just takes us out. And this way we'll never be on the hook for it.
Well, we had this little Goldilocks period, at least for investors, not for workers, because productivity never recovered from 2008. That's why for the average person, it never felt like the economy recovered.
Right, exactly.
Because it didn't for the average person.
Right, exactly.
But you had this period that was great for the investor class. Mm-hmm. You did have this period where you had this weird combination of low interest rates and low inflation. And that's over now. And the Fed has no idea what the fuck they're doing. I don't know why Powell hasn't been fired at this point. He's called everything wrong. He said the inflation is transitory. One of the worst calls in the history of the Fed. And then once he responded to it, because he waited too long, he's having to raise interest rates very quickly, and you're trying to unwind a policy that's been in place for 16 years in a few months. Of course, you've got bank failures and chaos starting to show through the economy. So that's really the question. What does he do now? He's really between a rock and a hard place. If he stops doing these rate increases, there's a good chance these asset bubbles inflate right back up, because everyone's gonna rush back into the market. Powell's done, right? So what? And then the inflation. So what does he do now?
All right. Well, let's not step on the last segment too hard. Sarathi Aramagam. I hope I pronounced your name correctly there, but thank you for the $20. It's very generous.
Thank you.
Haven't seen you here before, but hope you're enjoying it. And for those here for the first time, if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Tusker, any comments on the news that Xi Jinping is traveling to Moscow soon, and then they will be having a teleconference with Zelensky? I think that's great. Hopefully something good happens. Hopefully good things happen from it. But, this goes back to our headline segment. I mean, if China swoops in and saves the day here, that just really accelerates the pace at which we become totally irrelevant.
Would Zelensky even have the balls, though? Would he even have the balls? He's going to get a phone call. You motherfucker!
Yeah.
You motherfucker! You're going to get in bed with the fucking Chinese now? Now? Come on, man. Like if he talk about burning your bridges.
We will see. But, I mean,
it would be a fitting end to this story.
It would. Exactly. All right. So we have another sort of addendum to that DeSantis segment that we're going to do, because he made the news in a couple other ways this week. And Russell, as our sort of resident DeSantis sort of Nostradamus here, you want to talk about this a little bit?
Okay, so this is what I think it's really important. I think our audience understands this. Some people don't. The libs definitely do not. everything that you think Ron DeSantis does that's unpopular or politically damaging, or certainly everything that the media will tell you is damaging to him or the libs will tell you is damaging to him, is exactly the opposite of damaging. So this week, he pulled another one of his genius trolls. He has a brilliance for how to troll the libs. He has a genius for owning the libs. It's different from Trump style. He has his own way of doing it. It's more measured. It's a little more traditional. It's a little less Catskills comic, but it's very effective. So they've been accusing him of trying to ban books. And so the way, if they sent out a picture showing empty bookshelves at a public school in Florida, which it turned out to be a hoax, like they shot a shelf that was empty. And so what did he do? He went in, he fired the employees responsible. And now he did an hour-long news conference explaining exactly what books are in the public schools that he does not feel should be in the public schools. Here's the genius. He opened his press conference with a 6-minute video showing the pornographic images that are in those books, which of course the TV news could not show. So how do they lead off those stories? Okay, so we have a video of that.
Today, we saw some things that many people would consider to be jaw-dropping and offensive images that we just cannot show on television. The governor says it doesn't belong in schools either.
These books are clearly not just conversation starters about the birds and the bees.
The press conference began with a 5-minute video showing books with sexually explicit content found in Florida schools, like Flamer and Gender Queer. These books were reported by parents and then ultimately removed. Governor Ron DeSantis and his education commissioners say with good reason. They say the state isn't banning books, they're removing porn.
I just think parents, when they're sending their kids to school, they should not have to worry about this garbage being in the schools.
Removing clear instances of pornography and sexually explicit materials, often within arm's reach of our youngest kids, is not book banning.
And Florida school districts
All
are
right.
responsible.
Who do you think wins that debate? Who do you think wins that argument? If you are on the side of no, we need to have books with graphic depictions of cocksucking in the public schools, that is not a politically advantageous position to be in. I don't know how people got to a place where they thought that was defensible or politically desirable. Now, I know that a lot of people, blue MAGA generally, but not exclusively blue MAGA, it's very easy to bait them into supporting anything that is presented to them as a way to own the MAGA people, right? It's that, Fox News is mad about it, so you're for it. Listen, it is not just the MAGA people that do not want things like that in the public schools. And you know how we know that? Look at the results of the midterms for DeSantis. Look at the counties that he flipped. He moved Miami-Dade, a deeply Democratic county, by 30 points.
All right, let's take a look at this. So we have our little John King, Steve Kornacki board here that we pulled out from the election night coverage. So this was in 2018 when he was elected governor the first time in a blue wave year, mind you. He won very narrowly against the crackhead Andrew Gillum. Capital C crack, spacebar, capital C head, quotation. The crackhead Andrew Gillum. He won very, very narrowly. Like I said, this was 2018. Right, yeah. This was the blue wave year.
He won that whole election by like 150,000 votes.
Yeah, very, very. I think it was less here, 4,076 to 4,043. So,
oh wow!
Oh
yeah.
Very, very tight, as you can see here. So, pardon me. In 2018, Miami-Dade went for Andrew Gillum. 59.9 to 39. And here in 2022, in the midterms, DeSantis not only won Miami-Dade, he won it handily 55 to 43, a very Democrat-heavy county. Obviously, if we take another look here, go up to West Palm Beach, Andrew Gillum, 58, Ron DeSantis, 41. Then we go to 2022, Palm Beach County here, where West Palm Beach is. DeSantis flipped that as well. Let's go to Broward County. This is the real Democrat county. This is, Joy Beharville over here. I've driven through Broward County several times. My parents, retired New Yorkers who moved to Miami. We had to drive through this stretch. I know this area very, very well. Broward, which is the real Democrat stronghold in the state, 68-31 for Gillum in 2018. DeSantis didn't quite flip this, but he made significant inroads there, made up about 10 points there as well, losing it 57 to 42. We can be here all night with this. This is why those early results out of Florida on election night look like a red wave was actually happening, because even if you look at a place like Orlando, Gillum, 62 to 36 in 2018. Obviously, DeSantis didn't quite flip that either, but if you look, come on, cooperate, came within 7 points, closed the gap big time in all of these Democrat strongholds. So you get the picture.
Okay, so this is what I want to communicate. And again, I think the bulk of our audience understands this, but some people, stumble in like drunks to our channel who might not be on this page. This is a big part of why, if Ron DeSantis is the nominee, he's almost definitely going to be the president. And it's also the reason I think in the end he's going to be the nominee. These positions are extremely popular. You know how we know they're popular? Because Ron DeSantis didn't all of a sudden take these positions after the midterms. This is already after he introduces the Don't Say Gay bill, right? Which bans discussion of sexuality and gender with children up to 3rd grade. I'm sorry. If you think that's an unpopular position, you're a fucking moron. That is how... Do you really think there is a groundswell of support among parents for allowing the half-bright dunces that we graduate from education programs to talk to their 1st graders about sexuality and gender? And this isn't just hyperbole. We have the numbers going back 50 years. And listen, I don't mean to insult everyone who majors in education. I've known some very smart, dedicated people who have majored in it. But on the whole, people who choose an education major have the weakest academic records going into school, and they graduate with the best grades. So it's kind of the ultimate easy A major.
No, I've always said teaching is like playing the harmonica. Easy to do, difficult to master. Like, great teachers are great. Great teachers are to be celebrated. 90% of teachers you have are total fucking idiots.
Right. And the numbers show us that people who choose that are usually not the best and the brightest. So this argument, I don't want to tell teachers how to teach. Well, why don't you? Why don't you? When you look at the evidence, somebody probably should, because it doesn't seem like these people are really qualified to make those kinds of judgments. And setting that aside, this is really the issue. You can raise your kids at home however you want. But when you decide to impose this in the schools, you're forcing parents to have their children exposed to ideas and concepts and images and books that they do not approve of. And I'm sorry, most parents, the vast majority, do not want their child reading about how to have anal sex, or any other kind of sex for that matter. It's not even about that. How to hook up online, or graphic depictions of oral sex in books like Genderqueer. And it's not about it being queer. Do you think the story of O should be in a public school? Should we stock public schools with the works of the Marquis de Sade? Like, would anyone argue in favor of that? Just putting a queer branding on it doesn't all of a sudden make grossly inappropriate sexual content magically appropriate for children. And if you feel, if in your family you feel that's appropriate for your child, hey man, I mean, we let people raise their kids in Scientology. So, hey, okay, go ahead. As long as you're not actually abusing your child, or, you know, what I mean, then okay, that's on you. That's up to you. It's like, as Keaton put it earlier when we were preparing for this, you want to take your kid to a rated R movie, that's up to you, right? But you can't make everybody else's kids watch a
Right,
rated
because
R
you can't control who sees what in the school. You drop your kid off at the
Right.
school, they're in the teacher's hands, right?
And it is not for the state to talk to your child about sex and gender. It's not their fucking business. That's not the business of the state. That is a personal matter for families to decide on. You have families that are religious. We've always thought that that should be respected. You're going to force those families to have their children indoctrinated with those ideas. That's no. And if you think what I'm saying right now is a fringe position or a right-wing position or an unpopular position, I would direct you again to the results in the Democratic counties for Ron DeSantis after he had introduced this policy, after he had taken away the economic zone that Disney had since it moved into Florida in retaliation for their opposition to that bill. They voted for him overwhelmingly. And if Ron DeSantis is the nominee, you're going to see that repeated all over the country in Democratic strongholds, because all of these people that you will not allow to express their opinion publicly for fear of losing their job will be expressing that opinion the same way they did in the midterms, in the voting booth. And on a final note on this, I put together a supercut. You're seeing a lot of this right now because of the law that passed in Tennessee and other laws that are pending about children being at drag shows. Honestly, this is like a satire of like a crazy left determined to destroy itself. What could we do? What could we do? Oh, you know what? Let's bring babies to drag shows. Babies. Right? That's it. They'll never vote for us now. It's like fucking springtime for Hitler. What the left is doing to itself right now. Now, I put together a supercut because I don't think a lot of people on the left see these images. What people are responding to when they're saying they don't want children at drag shows are not videos of people dressed up like Dolly Parton reading Cinderella. What they're responding to are the many videos that we do have of drag queens doing strip shows with children and teaching them to solicit money as they dance with them. Now, I'm sorry. If you think that is something you're going to defend to voters, or something that voters are going to say, God damn it, they're shutting down 7-year-olds learning to solicit tips on stage. Where do I vote against these right-wing maniacs? If you think that you're in tune with the country by taking this pro-children at drag shows position, you're out of your fucking mind. You are out of your mind. And I have been speaking out against this since the show started because I knew we were going to get here. Since the show started, I have been saying, if the left does not divorce itself from these ideas, we are going to usher in a conservative wave that's going to make the Reagan Revolution look like Woodstock. And that is what the DeSantis presidency is going to be. And that's what mindlessly defending things like this has brought us to the precipice of.
Yeah. And obviously we couldn't show the supercut because a lot of the channels that have got, look, we showed a blurred out image from the genderqueer book a while back, and that got the video demonetized and de-reached, but yeah, I mean, look, you can find this stuff. There's a link in the description if anybody wants to find it. We're not going to show it on our channel because we don't want to, invoke any sort of backlash from the Google gods here. But some people have put it up on their channels, and you could check that out if you like. This is a perfect example, and we're going to get into this in our next segment of the left.
That link has been particularly infamous because it shows a child walking up to a drag queen and rubbing their crotch, and obviously the child just sees a sparkly costume, right? What I don't understand in that clip is why the drag queen doesn't push the child away. I don't get that.
Well, look, whether there's contact or not, you see there are a lot of kids at these very sort of like sexually.
Well, these things are going to happen when you mix children with sexually mature adults doing a burlesque.
Of course. And the question is like, okay, so the point that I made earlier offline was a parent can take their child to an R-rated movie. A movie that's rated R means no child under 17 admitted without a parent or adults present taking them into the theater. If you want to take your 9-year-old kid to see a slasher R-rated horror film, you are free to do that. Now, the rating above that is, of course, the NC-17 rating. Used to be the X rating. The NC-17 rating means no one under 17 with or without an adult there.
Right.
And so what DeSantis is obviously doing is, through his maneuver to try and suspend the liquor license of the Hyatt Hotel that was having these shows, trying to basically treat these as NC-17 sort of pornographic shows, meaning you can't bring the kid in there even with a parent.
Right.
Now, here's the thing, okay? I personally would say if you're a parent and you want to take your kid to the show, you could take your kid to the show. I would treat it as an R-rated movie myself. That's me. However, this is part of the genius of not only DeSantis, but of the right in general. They lay a trap for the left to walk into where they say, here's an area where we as the state can intervene, which is not the Republican small government libertarian-minded impulse, right? But they stray from that very strategically in places where they know it's going to pay off. Because now, by taking action against the drag show, what do? You force the left into defending parents taking kids to the drag shows, which, look, I personally would not take my kid to a drag show. I am not against another parent taking their kid to a drag show if they want to. None of my fucking business. I don't give a shit.
It depends on the nature of the drag show, because if you're talking about a drag show where people are lip syncing Liza Minnelli, fine, whatever, right? If you would not allow children to go to a strip club, and I think most people would not.
Yeah, well, you're not allowed to bring a kid into a strip club.
Okay, then you should not be allowed to take a child to a sexually themed, burlesque-oriented drag show. It shouldn't be drag show. It should be about the nature of the drag show.
The content. All right. I mean, fair enough. I guess I'd have to read the reviews before I could make that call. But anyway, the point is, you lay a trap.
At least a good sexually oriented drag show?
You lay a trap and you force them to walk into it. And they will walk into it every time because, as Russell said earlier, the temptation to not even necessarily own the MAGA crowd, but to own them in your minds, to feel superior and express your superiority to them.
They love that. They love that. That's like blue MAGA crack.
Right, exactly. Your sophistication over them. That is just something that, I mean, that is the cheese in the maze that they just cannot help but walk towards no matter what. All right.
I mentioned this on the last show just briefly. It was fascinating to me. The Last of Us, which is, quite good little sci-fi post-apocalypse thing. You had all of these blue MAGA people virtue signaling about this third episode of the series, which had, very sensitive depiction of a gay romance across several decades in this apocalyptic universe. And because it was well written and well done, there was really no backlash against it. But nonetheless, I saw all of these people behave as if there was a backlash because they just couldn't resist the opportunity to virtue signal against this imagined, culturally unsophisticated enemy that hated that episode that never materialized.
Right.
They couldn't. They're writing these long. Art has always been queer and stop attacking. Nobody was attacking it. I listened to the kind of things that will attack things that are overly woke. Nobody said a fucking word because it was good. It doesn't require even the actual cultural backlash for them to virtue signal off of it.
Right. No, absolutely. All right, here we go. Let's read some super chats before we move on into segment number 3 here. PMC finally got my check from SVB. Excellent. Good. Well, thanks for paying it forward, PMC.
Thanks for giving us a little bit of that.
Exactly. You get a little piece of the action.
You gave us our cut. A little taste.
Thank you. Got a little taste. It was a knee-jerk defense, Tusker. Thank you for the $2. That was from a while back, so I'm assuming you're talking about, well, it had to be something with the early DeSantis bit. Pardon me. God damn, why am I fucking burping all night? This is water. I haven't drank anything carbonated all day. I don't know. I got some gas in the upper tract here. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. Anyway, Christian Drake.
You got a juice stomach.
Yeah, man. Well, I definitely have a juice stomach. I've always had a juice stomach, but I didn't have any beer, seltzer, nothing. I got all this burping all night. Anyway, Christian, thank you for the $10. I bet a lot of libs would burn down a PTA meeting if they found those books in their kid's backpack while still trashing DeSantis' policy at the MSNBC Weekend Wine Club. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think there is a certain element. Oh, I shouldn't say I think there is. I know there is a certain elements of these people being very willing to virtue signal when there's no stakes for them.
Right. Well, this is what I'm saying.
And this is, by the way,
advocating for hetero-oriented erotica in
listen,
public
a lot
schools?
of these people,
I haven't heard anyone advocate for that.
Listen, we're not going to speculate on what Bethany Mandel said about Breonna Joy Gray because she blamed, because we're going to do that segment next. And I'll say this now because I don't even want to get into it in the segment because it's not neither here nor there. We can't verify it. But she said that Breonna Joy Gray made some dismissive or insulting remarks about parenthood in general, about how a lot of parents are narcissists and they have kids to sort of live vicariously through their kids, whatever.
Who claimed
that? Mandel, the lady who got stumped on the what is the woke thing, right? She claimed she was rattled by that, which who the hell knows? Who cares, right? But the point is, a lot of people who take these stances on these issues, like it's okay for these books to be in the school libraries, a lot of them don't have kids, and so there's no stake in the outcome.
They have no dog in the fight.
Right.
It's actually that's true. Like the people
and as a parent, I should say I do sense
most don't have kids.
Exactly. And as a parent, I do sense a certain contempt from these people for people who do have kids, right? The whole like Chelsea Handler thing, right? I'm going to make this video celebrating that I'm a, single woman with no kids who can do whatever the hell I want all day. The implication of that, the insinuation is you got to be a total putz to have a kid because look at all the sacrifice that's involved. And who wants to do that, right? They have no respect for that. But anyway, I'm not going to put that on Breonna Joy Gray because I have no idea whether or not she said it or not. So I don't want to even go there in the segment. But I'm just saying, in general, a lot of people who take these stances don't have kids. And you get the sense that they don't particularly want them and don't have any respect for what it takes to raise them.
Well, and this is why, frankly, a lot of times when I listen to conservative commentators critiquing the left and accusing it of a tendency towards, or the modern left, having a tendency towards narcissism and behavior that's really most in line with borderline personality disorder. I can't argue with that. They're right.
Look, I mean, what I will say is that having a child is the least narcissistic thing you can do. I mean, there's nothing less narcissistic than that. It takes a toll on you in all kinds of ways.
Sure. Especially,
in terms of just the time that you have to devote to yourself and your interests and what you love. I mean, it is a true sacrifice. So, you can call it whatever you want. It's not narcissistic, right? Nothing narcissistic about it.
I stayed for part of the pandemic. I stayed with friends of mine who have young children. That's the most time I've ever really spent around kids, honestly. And wow, man, what was involved in that? I mean,
Do
that's
they have twins?
twins.
Yeah, well, that's what I got.
That was their whole life, man. That was their whole life. Come home from work, pick up the kids, feed the kids, movie night with the kids, special trip to the park with the kids. I mean,
Just getting them changed into their PJs if they're twins is 15
right. Yeah,
minutes.
the whole night ritual, the evening
it takes
bath,
hours.
the whole thing. I mean, that's it. That's your life.
Oh, my
That's
day
it.
ends
That's your whole
when
life.
we're not doing the show. My day ends at 4:00. Come 4:00, I'm cooking. After I'm cooking, we're reading books. We're getting them changed. We're brushing their teeth. We're putting it. I mean, it's hours a day, every single day. So there's nothing narcissistic about that whatsoever. And look, when I was a young kid, or when I was a young guy, even up until a few years before I had kids, part of me, when I was at a dinner or something, a family dinner, and one of the people who I was at the meal with, their kids start running around screaming, I was thinking, man, I am loving the years when this is not my problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it is so nice that that's not my kid running around, because then I'd have to get up and start doing something. So, like, there is an element of like, yeah, man, wow, what a drag it can be sometimes. And it can be a drag sometimes. But, ultimately, people who have kids, most of the people, hopefully, if you have kids, you find it very rewarding and fulfilling in lots of ways. And also very fun at times. Like, lots of times can be loads of fun. But anyway, the point is, there is that judgment there. People with kids do pick up on the judgment from these smug lefties and libs who don't have them. Trying to say, you're afraid of them reading a book about a guy getting a blowjob? Like, you know what I mean? We do pick that up, right? I mean, I haven't encountered that yet because my guys aren't in school yet. But that's not lost on them. Your attitude, your sort of beneath the surface contempt is not lost on people with kids. They do pick up on that. I will have to say.
And they're going to vote accordingly. That's my argument. That's my argument. If you're running around posting memes about your support for children at drag shows and porn in public schools, you are in for a very rude fucking awakening when the voters get to render their judgment on this. Because part of the problem with censorship, de facto censorship, even if not official, where you've created a climate where people don't feel like they can say what they think, though they don't stop feeling the way they feel. You just don't know what they actually think.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right? You didn't convince anybody. You just made them stay silent. And the first time you give them an opportunity to strike out against you anonymously, i.e. in a voting booth, that's what they're going to do. And that's what they did in Florida. And that's what they're going to do nationwide. That's why I'm saying, if you're serious about building a left movement, you need to distance yourself from these ideas and these movements.
All right. PW. PW is a patron. You just signed up recently. Thank you, PW. Springtime for Hitler reference killed you. Well, thank you. I saw you logged into the meeting earlier. I don't know.
That's what it's like. It's like they're trying to think of what would offend the greatest number of people and render them absolutely politically unviable.
Right.
I know, drag shows for kids. Let them
We
vote
can make
for us
more
now
money with a losing campaign than we could with a winning campaign.
I mean, that's what it's like. Like, you could, in your wildest dreams, you couldn't think of it.
Cool Blue. Having any children and being reasonably good at it requires one to no longer be a child himself or herself. Well, yeah, no, definitely.
And that's why Keaton will be taking care of his kids after this show, and I'll be eating a piece of chocolate cake and banging on the piano.
Yeah, well, my kids are sleeping tonight, so I'm on again. Probably 6 o'clock in the morning is probably when I'm back in action. Not only that, but I have to watch Gandhi tomorrow morning because we're going to be covering that for the film club tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oy vey.
Yeah.
What a day I got in store for me. Anyway, all right, let's go. This is a nice segue into this.
Did you watch RRR? Are we doing both of them?
Oh, are we doing both? Well, I didn't watch RRR. I could. It's kind of late for me to watch both. Which one should we do? Should we do Gandhi or RRR?
People tell us in the comments which one you think.
Which one do you want to see? We're gonna do the Dissident Film Club tomorrow. Either Gandhi or RRR. I'd rather do Gandhi. I think Gandhi is probably more relevant.
I think Gandhi is very relevant to what's going on.
And I have seen Gandhi before, so it'll be easier for me to watch it again because
All right,
I have seen it. I've seen it when I was a kid.
We'll do Gandhi,
basically,
but
when I was
look,
14.
especially with RRR having just won the best song, maybe we'll do it next week or something.
Yeah, there we go. Why not?
It's kind of topical, right?
Hey, maybe we should do RRR for the patrons. What about that? There's an idea.
I mean, I think it's got potential to do well
on the public channel. All right,
yeah,
we'll make that available to the.
It's got this weird. It's one of these things that's just got this weird building momentum going on.
All right, well, why not? All right, Tyler Johnson, thank you. Only managed to catch part of the show tonight. Looking forward to the edited videos. You guys are the best. Thanks. Well, thank you, Tyler. I don't know if you're hanging out, but we got a lot of show to do. Actually, this one's running a little long, but that's okay. All right, perfect. So this segues nicely into segment number 3. This was a story that the Vanguard guys actually were not involved with, but they did make it go probably more viral than it would have, since they were the first to tweet about it. So we're gonna dick ride them a little bit. Which, by the way, I noticed one of their trolls. I noticed one of their trolls was in the chat earlier. Autumn Lee.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Wasn't lost on me, but look, I think that's very indicative of the kind of show they do and the kind of audience they attract. That you would have one of their trolls come in and troll the chat while we're interviewing the East Palestine Mutual Aid team. I think that represents the show and what they're about very, very well. That's why I didn't boot you, because I thought you were doing a very good job representing the level of class over at the Vanguard and their audience. So thank you for demonstrating that for us. Really appreciate that.
I just got to take this. It's not a super chat, but she's a long time viewer, first time caller. All right, so Gene, you are the reason Ron DeSantis is going to be our president. Okay. This channel will not be known for parenting expertise. Now, I did distinguish. I don't have a problem with children at drag shows if, they're doing Barbra Streisand, okay? I said sexually themed, specifically. Now, if your interpretation of that is that I have some kind of deep, abiding hatred of the drag queens that I've been hanging out with since I was 14 years old, then you probably should not be talking about politics because you don't understand them. All right, moving on.
All right. Here we go. Let's see. All right. So segment number 3. Last week, conservative author Bethany Mandel appeared on The Hill's Rising to plug her new book, Stolen Youth: How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. When she invoked the term wokeness in the conversation, talking about how the wokesters are indoctrinating children, Brianna pressed her for a simple definition of the term, and here is how that went.
Consider themselves very liberal.
Sorry,
and probably
grab this. I need a clean edit.
Of Americans consider themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. Sorry, it's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah, look, your time.
All right, there you have it. Now, that was embarrassing. It is tough to freeze on the camera, and that's any actor's worst nightmare, is going up on the stage and going up and forgetting your lines. And she froze. There's no question that she froze. And there's no doubt it's embarrassing. And look, I don't know who this Mandel person is. I don't know anything about her. I would grant anyone that there is a large overlap between anti-wokesters and idiots. Like, sure, that Venn diagram has a lot of overlap. There are such things as hicks and racists and redneck. I'm not saying these people don't exist. I don't think it is to the benefit of the society to paint large swaths of people with that broad a brush. That's not what we're about on the show, but I'm not denying that those people are out there and that those people are certainly anti-woke. However, the victory lap that the left and a lot of the liberals are taking here, which is, see, they are anti-woke, but they can't even define what woke is. The fact that an idiot froze on camera and couldn't get her way out of it, that does not mean that what people interpret to be wokeness nowadays is not a liability for the left and is not something that turns off the general population. I gave a definition of wokeness. I put it on our feed here. I said wokeness is the performative, shallow, and intentionally divisive invocation of identity politics to obscure more relevant and important societal power dynamics. There you go. I've defined it right there. So just because she couldn't define it on a microphone and she made an idiot of herself doesn't mean there is not a way to define it in a way that makes political sense. And there are people who oppose wokeness for the wrong reasons. Lots of people oppose wokeness for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean there aren't huge swaths of people who are anti-woke, if you will, for the right reasons. Now, you want to have another semantical argument? We got into a semantical argument about a month and a half ago about critical race theory, right? Critical race theory was defined as a legal theory in the 70s.
Right.
Just as wokeness came about in, I believe it was the 30s or 40s. Somebody posted on our handle there, he posted a response about Lead Belly coined the term wokeness.
Right.
Listen, I promise I know more about the Delta blues and the blues than you do. Okay, whoever typed that. Okay, so the point is, if you want to get
plays a
bogged
mean
down,
slide guitar.
well, this is the other thing. This is
You've
what I
ever
said
heard-
earlier.
You have not lived until you've heard Keaton do Crossroads.
Oh man, well I've done. What was the song? I used to play a bunch of blues tunes because I used to play at coffee houses and stuff like for hire. So the Mississippi John Hurt stuff, Nobody's Business. That was when we played. I played a lot of the Chicago stuff too because when we had a band, that was sort of the more rollicking stuff to play. But anyway, I know the blues. I'm great at the blues. I know everything. I know more about the blues than you do.
I'm a genius of the blues.
I'm a genius of the blues. I'm a scholar of the blues.
What was funny to me about that meme is they were blaming the right wing for appropriating it, and it's actually the mostly white activists who appropriated the term woke by referring to themselves that way. They're the ones who appropriated it from black activists. It wasn't the right. The right took them at their word. They said they were woke. So they said, okay, well, we're going to respond according to what you're calling yourself.
To me, it's the same trap that critical race theory is, because somebody else replied to that definition. They said, well, I understand what you're saying, but that is a perversion of what the term originally meant. And so why not try and fight the rights to win this term back? And I said, well, that's walking into the exact kind of trap that I've talked about a long time, because the problem is that even if you do eventually win this battle, right, and win back wokeness and claim it for yourself and claim it for what it truly is in its historical sense, right, they're just going to come up with another word for what you're doing, because what you're doing is not popular, right? The ideology you're putting forward, which, as I put it, performative, superficial, and intentionally divisive appeals to identity politics, that is not popular. And that exists, that is rampant in our culture right now, and it's not going over well with majorities of people. Here's a perfect example. So my wife is a lactation consultant, right? One of the big wigs in that industry, his name is Nils Bergman. He's from Sweden. He's a man. That obviously lactation work is dominated by women, but he managed to become very prominent in this world as a man. He wrote a piece in some journal defending the term motherhood because a lot of journals were switching from mother to birthing person or lactating person. And he pushed back on that by saying, like, look, there is a role to play just in human history. The mother figure is arguably the most important figure in the history of the human race. Motherhood is the most universal human experience to those who become mothers, right? There's something very base and just very natural and visceral and sort of inherent to that experience. The bonds between a mother and child. So we shouldn't be overly clinical about it, because the emotional and psychological bond that develops between a child and its mother is especially unique. And he got a lot of pushback. People tried to cancel him from conferences, from breastfeeding conferences, and this because how dare you try to put the word mother we're talking about. We're not even talking about any sort of trans. We're just talking about the concept and idea of a mother. There were people in that field who tried to run him out of town over that. That does happen. You're not going to convince people that that doesn't happen, because it does. And you're not going to convince people that that isn't fucking insane, because it is, right? And so that is what we mean right now when we talk about wokeness run amok. Now, if you want to take the bait and start fighting this semantical battle with the right wing, you're free to do that if you want, but I'm telling you right now, you're going to lose. And even if you win, they'll just come up with a new term for what you're doing, because the substance of the ideology, as it's currently practiced, is the problem. Obviously, as it was used 70 years ago, we would all sign on for that now. I assume, everyone here in our chat would, right? But that's neither here nor there.
Or critical race
or
theory,
critical
as
race theory.
originally defined.
Exactly. But that it becomes there becomes a point where those battles are obsolete, and choosing to engage them is just walking into a trap. And that's how I feel about that. So, for everybody thinking that they've won this major battle here because she got stumped on the air, I don't think it's that simple.
Yeah, I think that, and maybe she's telling the truth, because it's weird. Because the answer that the fragmentary answer that she gave shows a depth of thought about it, such that she could have answered it. Something happened there. She had a brain fart. She had a brain freeze. This was not a case where, like, you got some clearly dumb as dirt, congressman out of Alabama and asked them that question, and they clearly didn't really have an idea of how to answer it. It doesn't seem like that's what happened here. But the interesting part of this was the way with Blue MAGA. So often it's like somebody pushed a button and they all jump on the same narrative at the same time. You saw that with whataboutism. You never heard that phrase in your life, and all of a sudden, they're all accusing you of whataboutism whenever you point out any sins. So usually, I've looked at this a lot because it really was mysterious to me. It usually starts with somebody writes an op-ed in one of the very authoritative shitlib organs, Washington Post or New York Times. And it gets picked up by all the other pundits. And then that's what they're talking about that night on CNN and MSNBC. And that's how it gets pushed out to their brain dead followers. And so, yeah, like this whole week, see, they've been trying to push the invalidation of use of the word woke for a while. So that was like a political project waiting for a clip like that. That's why they jumped all over that clip. That was exactly what they needed to encapsulate what they've been trying to do, to make kind of shame people out of using the word.
Well, they do the same thing with CRT. They say, well, what is it? You can't define it, right?
Well, and that's by design, because whenever you start talking about what it is, they'll say, no, it isn't. And then it is, but then it isn't, but then it is, but then it isn't. Listen, and whenever you have moments like this, I could give you a very long list of people that Brianna could interview who would run circles around her on that subject. And nothing against her. Bring on Chris Rufo. And I'm not saying you have to like these people, but I'm saying somebody who can answer that question in a way that's not, if they're not going to freeze, bring on Chris Rufo, bring on Matt Walsh. I promise you he's not going to be stumped on how to answer that question. So, you know, there are a lot of people who this is their obsession as commentators, as intellectuals. Talk to those people, man. They'll answer you. They'll answer you very quickly. So yeah, I mean, like you said, just because you got one idiot, you're not going to convince people. Oh, well, look at that. That woman froze. Right. I guess all those people who got fired from their professorships or got fired from their jobs or got driven out of media, I guess none of that ever really happened. That doesn't actually reflect any kind of a philosophy or social movement.
Well, I wanted to put this chat up here. It's not a super chat, but I want to put it up anyway. There's a time when you've been infiltrated so much, you just need to abandon and reform. If I understand where you're coming from, I think you're right. I think there comes a point where, like, you're clearly not as good at this as the right is. The right is able to dominate narratives in the way that the left cannot. Partly because right-wing media is very well funded and well organized. That is a reality. But it's also a reality that they don't pick these internecine battles as much as the left do. And so this is how you become infiltrated to the point where you are caught flat-footed when they come and they start attacking words and concepts like wokeness and critical race theory. Not just that, but in a broader sense, and Russell talked about this, I believe it was last show or the show prior, the left has been so co-opted by capitalism, especially the younger left, that there is no way to challenge actual power structures. And it's been communicated to them very, very clearly that they are not going to be able to challenge capitalism. What they are allowed to challenge is bigotry. They're allowed to challenge overt expressions of race-based, gender-based, orientation-based, ethnic-based prejudice and vitriol. And so that is the arena in which they are allowed to fight, and they don't have the fortitude to say, well, fuck that, we're going to go beyond that. We're actually going to mount a bigger challenge to power than that. They don't have it in them to do that. And so they swim in this little kiddie pool.
These people are.
And then they have parties when they win a squabble. But they are avoiding the bigger fight. This is all an avoidance of the bigger fight. Tusker says this, I didn't know this history here, but CRT has origins in the Frankfurt School, which was funded by the CIA's Congress for Cultural Freedom in order to create an anti-communist compatible left that doesn't threaten the establishment. It's interesting you mentioned the CIA because I almost wanted to play this clip a few weeks ago whenever the CRT thing came up the first time. There's a great clip on the Bill Maher show of Ben Shapiro versus Malcolm Nance, CIA Malcolm Nance, African-American Malcolm Nance, on CRT. And Malcolm Nance was, of course, defending CRT, and Shapiro was challenging him on it. And Shapiro ended up making a great point, and I'm no fan of his, obviously, but he made a great point. He checkmated him because at a certain point, the conversation gets steered to Malcolm Nance saying, well, obviously, there are imbalances inherent to most of our laws. Their laws were written by men. We exist in an unequal society, and so obviously, laws are written with inherent biases worked into them. And Shapiro said, well, you seem to be making the point, as CRT offers, that this whole meritocracy is rigged. The meritocracy is just a huge con game. That seems to be the point you were making. Nance didn't really push back. But then here's where Shapiro checkmates him, and here's where CRT gets checkmated, and this is why I attack it in the way that I do. He says, well, if the meritocracy is so rigged, Malcolm, then why don't you forfeit your place within it? And Nance did not have an answer. He just kind of looked at the table because that's the ultimate checkmate. And that exposes it for the grift that it is. First of all, you shouldn't have to look any further. If Malcolm Nance is defending critical race theory, then obviously critical race theory is not a challenge to entrenched power.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
But when he's challenged on that, he doesn't have an answer because, of course, he's not willing to give up his place in the meritocracy. This is why I say what you learn in college is you don't learn to disrupt the system. You learn to feel and express guilt at benefiting by working within the system. And that's what critical race theory is really an expression of. That's what so much of wokeness is really an expression of. It is so much an expression of guilt. It is guilt processing.
Right.
That's why most of the people who dabble in it are upper middle class white people.
Right.
Because it is a way to process the guilt that they feel from knowing that they are the beneficiaries of an unjust system. And when you challenge them, you say, okay, well, if you're so woke then, if you're such a champion of this theory that says the meritocracy is rigged, then give up your spot. Give up your place.
Right.
Nobody wants to give up their place. They didn't go to school and learn this shit so they can give up their place. They learned it so they can convince you that they feel bad about it and that they wish things were better. And that's what it is.
And they can be good allies.
Exactly.
I think
Tusker's signing on now. I think
there are several things.
Tusker's in the house, everybody. Tusker's on her way. Sorry, Russell, go ahead.
My answer to this, I think there are several things going on. One is after the collapse of faith in Marxism in the 70s and 80s, the academics needed to shift their focus to be taken seriously. I'm not making an argument against Marxism or Marxist theory. I'm saying that was the climate at that moment. And they shifted it towards questions of identity. And at the same time, it was very convenient for corporate powers and the media they control to elevate that kind of a politics, because that's great for them, right? I mean, a non-class oriented left, a left with no class consciousness, that was their wet dream. That was what they had wanted forever. So of course they elevated these crackpots like Robin DiAngelo to positions of prominence in academia and society. Another element, and I keep trying to find the time to write this article. I want to write an article called The Great Giving Up, because a lot of modern social movements strike me as giving up on people. So, for example, there's this movement to get rid of standardized tests and even to get rid of the concept of merit. And this is the kind of CRT that's being practiced now. The idea of merit is white supremacy. Okay. The reason they introduced standardized tests was actually to eliminate elements of racism or sexism in results, right? Because the test score is the test score, right? That's it. You get this score, you get to go to Bronx Science. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what race you are. Because of the legacy of racism and the way that it's impacted the African American community, they were never able to be well represented amongst those who pass those tests, right? Because you're talking about problems in the community from that legacy that are going to impact academic performance. They couldn't figure out how to address that, because you're talking about something that can probably only be addressed by addressing capitalism, by addressing class. So instead, now they've decided, well, let's just get rid of tests and merit, which is really not a viable solution. Do you want a doctor who got into medical school based on equity? Is that who you want taking out your kidney? Somebody who got admitted on equity, on the argument that merit is white supremacy? That's what I mean. It's a great giving up. It's a giving up on the idea that we can elevate everybody and just resigning to the idea that, well, this is unconquerable, but we can't just say, well, we're going to lower our standards because we don't want to address the problem. So we're just going to say, you know what, those standards were racist.
Well, it's the ultimate incarnation of neoliberalism, because you're saying that the only way to tweak these dials is to tweak market outcomes. Outcomes, and that nothing else is determinative of merit except your position within the market, right? It's a lack of imagination. We cannot imagine a system where merit is evaluated in any other way but where you are, what your job is, what your place is within whatever organization you join. That is neoliberalism on steroids, and it's the only world that anyone can really be brought to even imagine, even conceptualize, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a version of what you were saying. Tusker, your mic is on. I'm going to admit you right now. Your camera's not on, but that's okay. You're calling in the old-fashioned way.
I don't feel like propping my phone up and doing all the stuff.
All right, no problem.
Yeah, no. This is exactly the reason. Like that Congress for Cultural Freedom that I mentioned. Like it's one of those things that gets overlooked by the left, and it has had a humongous impact on where the conversation has been driven and what is considered left wing and all of that stuff. And probably a reason why there's so much confusion. I mean, and I don't have like the source documents at the moment, but I mean, there's even like CIA documents like, hey, how to interrupt a left wing meeting, bring up petty grievances, bicker, spend hours talking about cultural issues, get everyone distracted with all of that stuff. This is literally their playbook, and the left continues to fall into it to this day because they are afraid of the left having actually staunch class politics.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, right? And what went on there, and you know, and now the ones who didn't want to be part of that are putting together their rally this weekend,
which I also support. I support any anti-war rally, and I hope that they get a whole buttload of people in there. I
hope so too. And like I said, free lunch buffet for anyone on Mastodon. So if you're on
Mastodon, but I mean, I just wanted to sort of encourage.
He slipped that in there.
I slipped a joke in. No, look, we hope it's a huge success as well, obviously.
Right, but if your audience is at all curious, there are the older book is called The Cultural Cold War, and it's by Francis Stoner Saunders, and then a newer book.
What's it called? Can you repeat? Because I'll read that.
Yes, The Cultural Cold War by Francis Stoner Saunders, and then a newer one called Finks: How the CIA Tricked the World's Best Writer. And that's by Joel Whitney. Just to mention and also whenever we say the CIA, whenever I'm saying the CIA funded these people, it's not necessarily like they literally showed up at the author's house, handed him a stack of cash and said, write some anti-communist stuff. That's not at all what happened. It's just that they pushed them, they promoted them, and they made them the pinnacle of left-wing thought just by marketing and promotion. And then that became left-wing politics.
Well,
and
go on.
No, Russell, you go.
I think that's also why we've gone from having great leaders like MLK and Malcolm X to having race hustlers like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo, because these people have been elevated because they are no threat to power, and they are very effective at stirring up grievance and getting everybody fighting everybody else with I mean, this vision of racism as being unresolvable. That's great. I mean, that's great for people who don't want the left to unite and come after their wealth. It's great for this whole industry of DEI that's risen up around this. You know, there have been some interesting articles written about DEI as a make work program for the middle and upper middle class. I think that's an element of it. I think as we made a great deal of progress on a lot of these social issues, not enough, but a great deal. I think a lot of these NGOs scrambled for how they're going to gin up outrage for fundraising. I mean, what do you do once they legalize gay marriage, right? Like, how do you fundraise at the level you did when you had that cause? Well, find an issue that's so divisive and so fringe that it'll never get resolved. You can just keep fundraising off that issue forever. I think a lot of that is that. I think you have a lot of these NGOs weren't going to just fold up shop as we began to make enough progress in these areas that they really didn't have enough outrage bait fundraise off of. I think they jumped on issues that were unresolvable.
Yeah, if they didn't, then their
gravy train going.
Yeah, their entire like cottage industry of grievance politics would fail, and then we'd have to get Joe Biden to bail them out. Yeah.
Well, there's also something very politically limiting about insisting that this is the actual political battleground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if this is the actual political arena in which these fights are had, then it's all just red team versus blue team at that point. Because those distinctions at least have the appearance of mattering on that level, right? When you start having these bigger conversations and bigger arguments and bigger sort of philosophical debates about systems of actual power, all of a sudden your whole construct becomes irrelevant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Red versus blue doesn't mean as much
Doesn't matter.
in that context, right?
Right.
And you can't really have that if you are committed to existing in a space where that paradigm is actually real. And this is why so much of progressive media has fallen victim to this, right? It's not just the corporate media and, you know, the corporate world with the Davos stuff. It's channels like the Young Turks, like the Majority Report, channels that we used to look up to in this space, right? Even they've fallen to this because it's just not possible to generate the sort of mass consciousness on the level that they need to sustain their viewer numbers, I guess. If you don't at least entertain, or not entertain, if you don't flat out concede that this is the fight here. Okay, the fight is, what is wokeness? Can you define it? No. Ha! There you go. You're an idiot. See? Those Republicans. Look how stupid they are. Look what hypocrites they are. That's a point for our team, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. And that sells. That sells, right? I mean, those are popcorn movies there. You know, and so I think that's one of the big appeals to it too. I'm going to admit Virtuoso here.
And those people really dominate the online space. I have with my old theater company on my other channel. I have a viral video back when I was still a good Democrat and my politics hadn't changed. And you know, it's that very MSNBC. You know, I wrote a whole thing to the tune of "You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. You picked a fine time to be a dumbass," and it's all about the stupid Rush Limbaugh watching people who blame everything on Obama. Dude, that shit has over 5 million views. I did a follow-up to the tune of "Why Can't We Be Friends?" arguing that the red and blue thing was just a mirage, and in the end, the 1% is running away with your money. That shit didn't go anywhere, man.
That's why I'm here doing this.
That was my follow-up. Yeah, that's why I moved into this space.
Playing the small clubs again.
No, and you know what? That was a much better video. Like, I went to a recording studio. It was. I mean, the other one was thrown together in a living room.
Yeah, a few guys on a couch. Yeah.
Yeah, that was produced and, you know, much better quality, multi-camera shoot. But that didn't have that confirmation of these deeply held beliefs that so many people are looking for online. I mean, that's what they're looking for. They just want to hear what they already believe confirmed by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Virtuoso, you're on.
Hi, guys.
What's up?
So, yeah, I just wanted to chime in about this topic you guys had earlier about kids, right, and leftists. So, anecdotally, I had a friend, you know, I'm no longer friends with, who had a kid like several years ago. I congratulated her in this new step in her life. You know, I've known her since high school, but like in certain spaces, you know, you deal with an alternative lifestyle, like such as, you know, same-sex, you know, relationships or bisexuality and all that, and it's like. Mm-hmm. I love this person. I cared about it, but it's like, ever since she had this kid, it's like, I couldn't help but feeling like this woman had this kid, to project her moral narcissism on people that don't have any. And that's kind of what prompted me to kind of call in here. Because like I'm just speaking from experience. It's like you meet people that, you know, don't quite have it all figured out, but yet they deal with this I guess overwhelming experience of having a kid, and it's great. It's your responsibility. Once you have it, it's yours, right? But I can't help but feeling this type of narcissism from people that feel like, oh, because I have this kid, I feel more superior to you. Because like, oh, I can't help but like wondering what would happen to my kid in the city and all this stuff, all this and that. And I'm like, listen, just relax, deal with less people. You know what I mean? But if you're gonna act out, you know, being somebody that you're not in terms of lifestyle and who you're with, there's no point in actually trying to judge people. Because like, if they feel like they need attention from people like, such as people that might have kids who just became newly parents, and I get it. Like, people have a responsibility, but there's people that want attention that, who, believe it or not, they're fucking old as shit, and it's like whenever you need something from them, it's like I don't have the time, and that is the challenge to people that aren't making that much friends past the age of 30. You know, they have members of their peers that have kids, and now it's no longer fun anymore. Because, quite frankly, man, I tend to look at, first of all, I look at what Shapiro's whole shtick is about leftists not wanting kids. It's like, bro, there's a kind of a profit motive, you know, when it comes to him. Like, how do I know this motherfucker doesn't have any Gerber stock, any McLaren, any diaper stock? Like, bro, shut the fuck up. Honestly, whatever he talks, it's like it has a dollar attached to it, and I tend not to listen to him. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I don't listen to him much either. I happen to be watching him on the Malcolm
I
X show. On the Bill Maher show.
I never watched Ben.
No, I never watch him. No, I find him very, very irritating to listen to. But look, to your point, it is true that having kids does create massive changes in your life, and it is true that it does change who you are as a person. Like, it does change who you are as a person. I have 2 kids. I will fully admit I'm not the same person as I was before I had them. And that transition, especially when, in my case, having 2 at once, right? And you know, and having to go just that change in lifestyle from literally the day before they come to the day after is just extremely jarring and shocking. And I'll speak as a dad. You know, it was easier for my wife because she's their mother, right? Motherhood, is back to what I said earlier, is a unique thing. There's a bond there that there is not. There's a bond between a mother and a kid that there's not between a father and a kid. She grew them. She feeds them with her body. There's a biological bond there that is instant. Whereas with me, I'll be completely honest, it took me a long time to really bond with them. I loved them. They were my kids. I knew it was my duty to care for them, and I loved having them. But I didn't really have fun with them until they kind of got a little older and started talking and started playing and goofing around. And now they're like my buds, right? But yeah, I have less time for my friends now. I'm sure that's frustrating for a lot of my friends now. You know, I have less time to do this show than I probably should have if we were serious about growing it quickly, which we are now. But yeah, I mean, we should be doing 4 shows a week, not 2. I can't. I got 2 kids. It's that simple. It does change who you are. And it is difficult. It's difficult. It's a difficult transition for people around the parent, but it also is a difficult transition for the parent in a lot of ways. Even if it's ultimately something that they feel is very worthwhile. It is difficult. So you know, I would just want to give you the perspective of the parent. It's not lost on them, the changes that are going on. And I mean, I can't speak for your friend. Obviously not everybody is the same. But I know I come off as a shittier friend to my friends now than I did before I had kids. There's no question. There's no question that, like, when my friend texts me and wants to hang out and I, you know, mean to get back to him and then, oh shit, something happens with the kid, I got to go take care of that, and then I forget and I don't text them back. Like, that happens from time to time, and I'm sure it's frustrating for them. And I'm sure they're like, man, Keaton's a bit more of a dick now that he has kids.
I mean, you gotta understand when people have kids, like.
No, but it's frustrating. I get it. It's annoying. And
Mm-hmm.
it can feel like you are being shunned because you are being shunned because, look, there's only so many hours a person has in a day.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
And there's
Right.
sacrifices there.
And because every
but that's
single
not all.
time-
That's not rooted in narcissism. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I would bet in more cases than not, it's just a response to an inevitable seismic change in your day-to-day life.
Right.
Yeah, and Keaton, I was just gonna weigh in on that as well, and that's because every single time that they're calling their friends or texting their friends, that means another laptop is being toppled off of a counter.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Or, because kids are a ball of chaos. I mean, that's
yeah.
literally what a child is. It's this new being that is seeing things for the first time, experiencing things for the first time. They're curious. They're all over the place. They're hyperactive.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have kids myself. I have friends that have kids. And, whenever they had kids, it was just natural. Like, oh yeah. I mean, like, I remember like one of my best girlfriends way back in the day, whenever I first heard she was pregnant, I remember just feeling like a profound sense of just sadness because I knew, once that baby came, there's less time. There's just less time. There's no more late nights. There's no more like spontaneous, hangouts and stuff like that because there's nothing spontaneous about that parent's life anymore.
Of course, right.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
Rachel.
it's like it's like this. Like the person that ended up having a kid was like polyamory, and I'm like, wait, you have this kid, and it's like all of a sudden you kind of shit on the lifestyle you had, and I'm like, okay, I see what it is, but like, I tend to look at Chelsea Handler's situation, and it's like, okay, yeah, she is irresponsible and she is selfish, but is he happy? Yeah.
No. Listen, I'm not saying. Yeah, but I'm not saying she's a selfish person because she chooses to be.
No, I'm not saying
single.
you. I'm just speaking for myself.
Sure. No, but what I'm saying is like I don't throw the judgment the other way either, and I don't think anybody should. Do what you
Right.
want. Yeah, but I don't really care what other people do.
Listen,
but
I'm gonna
go ahead.
I'm gonna give my old man advice on life. No matter what you choose, you're gonna be drinking some form of poison.
Right.
You got to choose which poison you think you can drink and live most happily with.
Exactly.
You're either going to have a family, which I mean, in this particular conversation, which is going to come with its own poison, or you're not going to have a family, which is going to mean you're probably going to be pretty isolated, especially as time goes on, because other people around you are going to have families and you're not. So you're not going to be going to the park with the baby and all of that, right? That's your choice. You got to pick your poison. You're going to drink a poison one way or the other.
Right.
And no matter what you choose, some part of you will always crave the opposite of what you chose, because if a part of you didn't want it, it wouldn't have been a choice. You wouldn't have to think about it. You just would have
Right.
You just would have done what you did. After you make that choice, yeah, you're always going to wonder what if. And I always think of a line from Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities where he says, elsewhere is a negative mirror, meaning another place is the opposite place of the place that you chose, right? That's it. You gotta, that's a choice you gotta make for yourself. Pick your poison. Which one
Pretty
do you
much.
think you can drink, right? So Keaton chose his, and I chose mine.
Right. I just kind of look at it like, based on my economic position, it's like, it's kind of a like real talk. It's a money pit,
Well,
That's all I could.
Well, sir, yeah. Look,
but it comes with certain rewards.
Yeah,
Look,
it does.
Look,
Absolutely.
for me, that wasn't for me. And I think it was better for any kids I would have been around to not, because they can feel that. They can feel that you really want to like jump on a horse and head out for the horizon and never come back. They can sense that shit, right? But, I mean, some people like look, I know Keaton better than I know anyone that I've only met in person once. And I could tell he's a good dad. I could tell he's that kind of he's that kind of guy. But it's definitely not for everybody. So that's you got to know yourself. You got to know yourself. Is that for you? But no matter what you choose, there's going to be a downside, man. Like, do I wish that I had that on some level? Yeah, I do.
And there's part of me that feels like, you know what, I could raise a family, but I'm responsible. I can be sometimes argumentative. I can be stern, but I need that economic stability to facilitate that. You know what I mean?
Well, there's that too. I mean, generationally, this is the worst time in this country in several generations to try to have that, and that's why you got to drop in birth rates.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll speak, in my case, we were at the point where we felt like we were ready for one, and then that screen turned around and we went for the consultation and there were 2 heartbeats in there. Right. Yeah. So believe me, I know where you're coming from there, but yeah, I mean, look, I think obviously we hit on something, because otherwise you wouldn't have called in, and I could tell in the chat that we hit on something, because that's there, that tension between people who choose that life and people who don't, it's there, and it manifests itself in a lot of these political questions, especially around the social issues, not just when it comes to like woke stuff, but just like more like even more broadly than that. This question of family values, right? Family values became this like almost nasty word on the left, right? Where family values became synonymous with right-wing Christian totalitarianism. And to a certain extent it has. I mean, yes, they, people like Jerry Falwell and stuff, definitely claim that for their for themselves.
I think they use family value.
Cynical.
I'm sorry, Keena.
Go ahead.
But like for generations of that, it's like they use that as like sort of like a Trojan horse to like commit, fiefdom over dominion over people. And I as much as they like to preach family values, they are really anti-family because they don't support.
Of course.
They don't support trade unions.
No,
they don't support raising the minimum wage. They don't support pro-choice. So in reality, it's very ironic coming from them saying all that shit, by enacting, anti-family initiatives to separate people, especially the working class, atomize them.
No, I understand that 100%. Right. I agree with that 100%. I think every word of that is completely true. But there is an element of the left that I think signals a contempt for family and signals a contempt for people who choose to have families. And that comes through. Listen, why do you think Bernie Sanders was particularly popular, even with a lot of normies and right-wing leaning people, even though he's very far left? Because he's a grandfather, and he talks about his grandkids a lot, to the extent that he gets into his personal life, right? And he talks about working families, right? I mean, he messages that. Right. And to the extent that he is a leftist, is that he is trying to make life easier for families.
Yeah, 3 words: paid family leave.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And he's working families all the time. Hammers on that all the time. He's this old guy. He's got, a wife of whatever, 30-something years. He's got the grandkids who he speaks very highly of. Videos would surface of him playing around with them. He strikes people as a family man. What his appeal was is he didn't come off to people as someone who's trying to reinvent society and redefine traditional roles within a societal framework. He came off as a guy who's just trying to make life easier for ordinary people living their ordinary lives. And that's why he was extremely popular. It's why he's still the most popular senator, right? Even though he's got these fringe, crazy left socialist views. That was a huge part of him. Whereas, not everybody gives off that same vibe.
I mean, really, like what Bernie Sanders is a reformer and not a revolutionary. Like,
I agree, but I'm talking about this specific part of his messaging. Yeah.
I understand.
why he was able to get applause out of a Fox News audience.
And
Exactly.
also,
Exactly.
just with his messaging, whenever he says working families, he's not dividing it up. He's just saying working families.
Right.
It is up to the listener to devise what they view as a family unit.
Yep.
That's part of the messaging. It's not pushing a particular type of family on anybody.
Well, that's, some people have pointed out, kind of bring it full circle, that he let the woke faction intimidate him into incorporating that bullshit into his second campaign. And it hurt him, and I agree. I agree. I do not think the laundry list of identities that he felt a need to list every time he gave a speech was helpful to him. I think
he ran a Big Tent campaign. I mean, I looked at it as like, really, when I looked at those people from Black Lives Matter kind of like bum rushing his campaign speeches, it's like, I kind of looked at it as cathartic, because literally the guy was just trying to look out for everybody. He wasn't being, exclusive to that messaging, as far as, having a system of equity. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we got believe it or not, we got another segment to do.
I'm sorry. No, don't let me stop you, Phil.
Okay. No, you guys are fine. But thank you so much for calling in, guys. I appreciate it.
Always fun and informative, guys. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Virtuoso. All right. Tusker, thank you so much. All right, cool. All right, let's do this. Okay, so I know it's getting late, but I have to do this because Russell took a victory lap earlier on a prediction that he made. And what has been my sort of main point through the duration of this show, and I'm not talking about this episode, I'm talking about going back months and even years, the reason why Democratic Party politics are futile is not necessarily because of the rigging of the party machinery, although that is certainly a part of it, but it is the voters themselves within the Democratic Party who are, of course, going to be resistant to any sort of populist left movement. Your problem is not the DNC, it's the PMC, as I would say.
Hang on. Do we want to wrap up some super chats before we get totally into this?
Oh, do we have them? Did we miss them?
Do we have them? I mean, I have somebody here like asking if we're going to do the super chats.
Oh, okay. Then let's
so maybe they super chatted us.
Okay. JSP, woke political correctness run amok. And when I think of woke culture, JSP, I think of Sheila Broflovsky.
What?
What? Yeah. That's a version of it. I mean, probably, yeah.
That's that Upper West Side New Yorkie kind of thing.
Yeah, right, exactly. Did we miss any other ones? I don't think we missed any other ones. Did we miss any other ones? I'm looking back here.
I don't think so. I didn't see too many.
Yeah, I didn't see too many.
Come on, make it rain like a kid's drag show.
We're up late, working overtime tonight. Anyway, so yeah, look, I've been on this page from day one about how it is the voters within the Democratic Party who are the problem, and that is why it is useless to try and run a Democratic primary campaign or try to take over the Democratic Party. So now that Marianne Williamson has announced her challenge to Joe Biden, certain factions of this sort of PMC clique that I have been talking about and sort of describing very accurately, I might add, as the main barrier to progress within the Democratic Party, have been voicing their opposition to Marianne's candidacy. Here's a video that went semi-viral, and I was very relieved because this makes my point for me. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but you'll get the point very, very quickly.
Democrats, can we please stop talking about primarying Joe Biden? Who should run against Joe Biden? Will Democrats get behind Joe Biden? This many Democrats want an alternative to Joe Biden. Can we just not? The absolute last thing democracy needs right now is a Democratic primary.
The
We're in late-
absolute last thing
Look-
democracy
look-
needs
look-
right now
look at the
is
crazy eyes.
democracy. Yeah, the absolute last thing we need now is to actually practice the thing that we supposedly care so much about. It's the last thing
Stage
we need.
capitalism with a corrupt Supreme Court on a knife's edge between autocracy and democracy, and people want to spend $100 million to undermine our successful incumbent when the alternative is the twice impeached criminal ex-president or the man who is single-handedly turning Florida into a fascist dictatorship?
Okay, that's it. I rest my case. We do not have to play anymore. You know everything that this idiot is going to say. Here's my point, folks. Here's my point. And this makes it to the point where I don't feel like I have to keep making this point as long as I can have this segment to show people, okay? People like this, with buttoned shirts like this, with refrigerators like this, with kitchens like this, are never going to vote for a populist progressive candidate in the numbers you would need them to in order to win a Democratic primary. That's why this whole premise is a joke. Well, we need a challenge from the left to Biden because we need to put these ideas out there. We need to make the progressive case. Okay, make the progressive case all you want. The question is, in a primary, to whom are you making that case? You're making that case to people like this. These people, I'm sorry, they are not persuadable. They are not reachable. We talked about the Sanders campaign in our chat just a few moments ago. The Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign was obviously one that took place within the Democratic Party, and it was one that had to play by Democratic Party rules because the Sanders to Trump voters, the real populists in his base, they switched to Trump in 2016. So they were Trumpers this time around.
Right.
They were not available to him this time around.
Right.
In order to win the nomination, he had to convince people like this woman to vote for him. You cannot win a Democratic primary without getting enough people like this to vote for you. Not all, not necessarily even most, but you need a considerable percentage of people making these kinds of arguments in these kinds of houses, in these kinds of kitchens with the rotten bananas it looks like above the refrigerator. I don't know why they're there, but anyway, you need them to pull the lever for you. Which
it
is
looks
why
like she's at a pottery wheel.
Exactly.
She
So-
stopped in the middle of pottery class.
So for all my frustrations, for all of a lot of people's frustrations about the Bernie campaign of 2020, he was running a campaign that had to win a certain amount of these types of voters, which is why he did not go after Joe Biden that hard. He didn't go negative on the other candidates in the race. I know a lot of people in our space were very, very frustrated by that. He did not challenge the Russiagate narrative, which I know a lot of people were very, very frustrated by that. He did not challenge the impeachment narrative. I know a lot of people were very angry about that. The reason he couldn't do any of those things is because he knew that he could not win if he alienated all of these kinds of voters like the person who was on the screen right here. And I know that that was frustrating. And I know that in retrospect, you can say, well, obviously his strategy of appeasing these voters did not work. And that's true. But I would maintain it's the only strategy that had any chance at working. Because if you alienate all of these voters, you can't win in the primary. And so his theory of the case was, I'll get as far as I can without them. I'll get to my 30, 35%, young people, progressives, maybe some of the populists who didn't switch to Trump. I'll get that 30, 35 points in the polls. I'll use that to win the first 3 states, after which people like this will begrudgingly vote for me in enough numbers to get me to 50. Maybe not most of them will vote for me, but enough of them will bend the knee because I'll have the momentum and we can't have a prolonged primary because that helps Trump. And so I don't like that it's Bernie, but if I can get even 20% of people like this to surrender and vote for me after winning the first 3 states, I can get to 50. That I maintain, while it was obviously not a winning strategy, that was the most practical path to the nomination because you can't win if you turn these people off. Now, it turns out, once the signal came down from on high, Barack Obama, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, they all said vote for Biden. What happened? He didn't get any of these types of voters.
Joe's the one who can win.
They all went to Joe Biden. And the reason I made a point to tell this story is because that is when I knew for sure that the Democratic Party was a dead end. Not because of Barack Obama or Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg, but because of the psychic power they have over dipshits like this. Yep. And so when you are arguing for an inside the Democratic Party strategy, your problem is not the DNC or Obama or the higher-ups. Your problem is voters like this. This is your problem right here. That's why I left her on the screen for as long as I did. Now I will mercifully remove her from the screen. But that is the issue. That is the issue. That is why you talk about, is Marianne out to sell books? Is Marianne good on this issue or bad on this issue? Or what's her motivation? Or can she be moved? It does not matter. It does not matter. Whatever case you are generating in your head for Marianne Williamson has to appeal to that voter I just told you. And that's not happening. It cannot happen. It will not happen. That's what the 2020 Bernie campaign was. That the whole point of that campaign is we're going to see if we can break through to this crowd. We knew it was a long shot, but we knew it was the only shot we had to implement the kinds of changes, or at least fast track the kinds of policy changes that we wanted to see realized in the short term. And once that failed, it was completely obvious to me at that point. It was obvious to me before that point, but it was the best shot we had. Completely obvious past that point that it was a dead end. And so there you go. I just had to get that out of my system. Thanks for indulging me.
That is a well-deserved victory lap, and you're right. This woman is really the avatar of all the Democrats. Because think about Democrats that you know. Aren't they kind of mostly like this?
They're like this. Here, the sound's off. You can keep talking.
Yeah, she's a particularly animated, probably graduated from a theater program version of that. But she's that. Look, she's even got the crazy eyes. They all of these have the crazy eyes. Like the one who was going to head the Department of Disinformation, Julie Andrews over there. She had the crazy eyes. They all have they all have the crazy eyes. This is it. When you talk to libs, this is what they all sound like. You know, I mean, she's particularly infuriating, but they all sound like this. They all think like this. So yeah, I mean, that's it. And that was really my final revelation too. That in the end, if Barack Obama and people like him have a veto over your political project, well, there's no point to starting even within that party. And the reason they have a veto is because of voters like this. This fucking moron. Have you looked at an opinion poll? Have you looked at an opinion poll? Our successful incumbent? What are you talking about? It's not like she's not even informed. And none of them really are, because they only listen to certain propaganda stations and only read certain propaganda outlets. So, but that, I don't know how you don't know that Biden is an unpopular president with a historically unpopular VP. How do you not know that? What are you talking about? Successful how? I don't think you played this part. She also says he's accomplished more than any other president in his first 2 years. What are you talking about?
He's for workers' rights.
Have you ever heard of LBJ? Have you heard of LBJ? Have you heard of the Voting Rights Act? What are you talking about? Medicare?
Look, she also talked about Joe Biden's record on workers' rights, as if his signature interaction with labor unions has not been to break up a strike. Like, it's just, it's from outer space. It's just so ignorant, so uninformed. But
and Ukraine. Oh, that was the best.
Oh yeah. No, look, it's par for the course with these people.
I'm glad that we have a president who had the foreign policy experience to bring together a coalition to stand against Russia and Ukraine. You maniac.
This is what you're dealing with. And the reason why you put it on the voters, because a lot of people are still, I know, going to give me the pushback. Well, they're propagandized. We have to dismantle the propaganda. Every party wishes they could control their voters this way. The Republicans try to control their voters this way. We opened the show tonight. Second main segment was Ron DeSantis pivoting on Ukraine. That's a lesson right there. DeSantis knew he couldn't win the Republican primary unless he bent to the voters' will. The voters demanded an anti-interventionist candidate. His neocon bullshit was not going to fly in a Republican primary. So what did he do? He changed his position to serve and meet the voters where they were. Democrats never do that. Democrats simply tell their base what they can and cannot do for them. And then they deliver on 10% of what they say they can do for them and say, well, we tried for the other 90%, but, the parliamentarian, the Republicans, the Supreme Court, this, that, and the other, right? Is a completely different relationship between the party and its voters in GOP circles and in Democrat circles. Right?
Well, the Democrats are a party of hall monitors.
Exactly.
They're a party of Tracy Flicks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, let's read this here. Rotting bananas are good for making banana bread. Yeah, I guess that's true. But she doesn't look like she has enough of them up there. It looked like she only had 3 rotting bananas up there. I don't think you can get a loaf out of that. Anyway, one final segment of the evening. I know we're going long, but thank you guys so much for staying up. We knew this could be a long one, and some of these conversations got deeper than we expected, which is always fun to see. Please like this stream and subscribe to this channel. Like I said, working overtime for everybody tonight. Please give us a like and a subscribe. Let's get us out of that 666 territory so we don't have to play the Mark of the Beast on the next show. I think we're at 667. I think we made it out of there. Yeah, 6671. Let's see. Did anybody leave before then? That's loading. All right, we'll check that out. Yes, one person did leave. Down to 6670. So, all right. Anyway,
we're out of the 666 though.
We're out of the 666 zone. Indeed.
Yeah, all right.
All right. So, after the fall of Silicon Valley Bank, a crisis of confidence appeared to have spread among those invested in smaller regional banks. So, last Friday on March 10th, Signature Bank lost approximately $18 million worth of deposits, 20% of its overall stash. Now, according to the New York Department of Financial Services, the bank failed to provide reliable and consistent data, creating a significant crisis of confidence in the bank's leadership. On Sunday, they seized the bank and handed it over to the FDIC. Notably, Barney Frank, who co-authored Obama's signature regulatory legislation with Chris Dodd, of course, the Dodd-Frank bill, was
Before lobbying to water it down.
Exactly, yeah, was a director at Signature Bank at the time of its seizure, and so he made a little bit of news this week by defending his decision to join Signature Bank board before the failure. This is a very, very short piece here. He says, I worked as a member of Congress for a certain objective, and I would love to try and do a Barney Frank voice. He's a very fun guy to impersonate, but if you notice, podcasters don't impersonate Barney Frank much because you would ruin your microphone in about 5 seconds with all the spit and snot you would hurtle onto it if you actually tried to do a good impression of Barney Frank. So in the interest of keeping my equipment intact, I'm just going to read him as Keaton. And then having retired, not having a pension by my choice, not wanting to be a lobbyist for reasons personal, I need to make some money. Frank joined the board of the bank in 2015, 2 years after he left Congress, and has made about $2 million in the role, according to the Financial Times. His career was capped by the Dodd-Frank regulation package to place new restrictions on banks in the aftermath of the 2008 meltdown. But Signature Bank was seized by state regulators after the failure of SVB last week. Officials took over the bank after customers flocked to them to withdraw their money following the historic fall of SVB. They seized the firm amidst the bank run in order to protect depositors. Frank has drawn particular scrutiny for publicly calling to increase the $50 billion threshold for banks receiving increased regulatory oversight during the debate on changes to Dodd-Frank in 2018, a change that would have directly impacted signatures. So basically what Frank lobbied for in his role here was to increase the amount from $50 billion to $250 billion in total deposits that would bring a small regional bank like his bank, Signature Bank, under the regulatory jurisdiction, if you will,
and that's the
Dodd-Frank.
same thing the CEO at SVB lobbied for successfully.
Yes, and it's look, it's not certain that they wouldn't have failed anyway. There's still a lot of unanswered questions as to how they failed. They're going to investigate that now, but it's certainly plausible to put out there that if they were under the sort of pre-2018 Dodd-Frank regulations, this may not have happened. And so isn't it ironic that the co-author of that signature piece of legislation worked to undo it in his particularly bank's case, the bank that he went to work for after leaving government?
I don't think you can find a story that better demonstrates that we need a revolution. Because even the weak bank regulation, nowhere near the Glass-Steagall standard that had caused and opened the door to the financial meltdown, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which separated investment from banking because of what happened in the Great Depression. Bill Clinton, in his great wisdom, undid that. So we get Barney Frank, which is a much, much weaker regulation, but it's something. The system is so corrupt that the man whose name is on the bill gets co-opted to go lobby against his own legislation from his former life. And he's successful in doing so, presumably partly because of contacts that he still has from the days when he was a legislator. What can you say about a system like that? That's a broken system. That's a system that's really beyond reform. You need to burn it to the ground and start over. It's too late. You're not going to be able to reform this anymore through regular order democracy. How would you even do that? Who are you going to vote for that's not going to get bought out by a bank? Who are they going to make available to you to vote for who would actually stand against this system?
Well,
and even if they did stand against this system, how long is it going to take for them to get co-opted by Mama Bear? It's hopeless.
It's not even a question, though, of who you would vote for, which is certainly a valid question, but it's what do the people you vote for do? How do they respond to a situation like this? As Nick INGVOLDSTAD, who, by the way, is a brilliant composer, we're working on another musical creation with him now, which I guess will be our Sunday Funny this week. But anyway,
that's some stuff.
Yeah, he said the backstop was necessary, and this is the point that Russell was making offline, that you have a system that is just so fucked up to begin with that the only way to protect people within it is to perpetuate it, right?
Yes,
because if
that's
you
the
let
trap
justice be served, if you actually let the system play out in its purely ruthless state, then you would just say, well, we're just going to let the banks fail. And then what happens? Then there's a run on other banks, right? This time it's SVB, right? Silicon Valley Bank. But as Greenwald made the point on his show, what if it were the Farmers Bank, right? All of a sudden, public sentiment would be on the side of the farmer. Well, you got to bail out the farmer. Yeah, who gives a shit about these tech bro douchebags? Fuck them, right? But if that causes a run on the Farmers Bank, now what happens? What happens when these farmers can't make payroll and they can't make it? So, like, it becomes a situation where you're stuck. The only way to protect people, to protect ordinary people, is to back up the rich people. And that's why the system is just so fucked beyond repair, because you backed yourself into a corner where you cannot do the just thing. You cannot do the just thing, because to do the just thing is to penalize a lot of ordinary people who are going to get hurt alongside it. That's called capitalism, right? That's how capitalism works. When you gain a certain amount of capital, not only is it easier for you to accrue more capital, but it is easier for you to make an underclass of people with no capital dependent upon your capital to live. And that's how you get yourself into a situation like this where there is no good move. So it's not even about who you can vote for. It's what does Biden's Treasury Department do in this spot? Do they see how many banks go down? Because that was an argument. Well, let's just wait and see what happens. Okay, SVB is down. Signature, there was a run on them. Will it stop there? Do the investors and depositors at these various regional banks, do they hold strong and trust that their bank is solvent? Or do they panic and they get the fuck out? And then once a few of those go down, how many more go down after that? And after that, and after that? Do we trust that this isn't going to spread like wildfire? You don't really want to make that bet if you're Joe Biden, right? And so what could they do? There is no right answer because you've backed yourself into a corner with this system as it's been built.
Well, and something else we were talking about offline, I think people have forgotten about this now. When Lehman Brothers went down, they decided not to bail it out. You know, they actually decided to stick to their Republican principles. Bush was president at the time of, hey, that's capitalism. Let's let them go down. You know, they made risky bets. Let's let them go down. That so quickly spread through the banking system that businesses like GE couldn't make payroll because our entire economic system assumes the availability of credit. And after that happened, no bank would extend credit to anybody.
Right.
So that is part, I believe, of why they rushed in so fast to bail out this bank, because they didn't want another Lehman Brothers. Because once it started, it spiraled out of control, and it was impossible to put the genie back in the bottle after that. And they're continuing, they're trying to put out these fires as quickly as they arise. As I was touching on earlier, the entire economy is built around the assumption of easy credit. And all of these banks, all of these businesses, all of their investments have been made on that assumption. Look what happened with SVB on the most, simple level. There was a lot going on there. Apparently, Peter Thiel put out the word the bank was in trouble. It might have triggered that run on the bank. I'll talk a little bit about Kim Iverson's theory and the crypto thing. I'll get into that. But what we actually know is they were holding bonds, which was not a crazy strategy. Long-term treasury bonds. It's not like, credit default swaps. That was fine as long as interest rates didn't go up. Once the interest rates went up, those bonds, they couldn't sell them anymore. So as this was kind of the chain reaction, as these interest rates go higher, all these tech companies that have been built on cheap money started to run out of money. They needed to start drawing down their accounts. So they needed to have the money available to be able to give them their money. So they had to start selling these bonds at a loss, which had lost value because the interest rates were lower than bonds that you could buy now. So Who wants to buy a 1.5% interest bond when you can get a 4.5 interest bond? Who wants to buy that? So they start taking losses on these bonds in order to be able to cover these withdrawals. And that, the rest is history. Now, is this the last bank that's going to happen at? I mean, they were uniquely exposed to tech, and tech is uniquely vulnerable to rising interest rates. But we just had Credit Suisse, just had to be bailed out by the Swiss government. And it's very unlikely to be the last, because you're going to have a lot of these banks that have made risky investments. This is why the regulation coming out of 2008 needed to be a lot stronger, because this is a world of greed and avarice, and any loophole you leave them in the system, they're going to exploit. How long did it take us to get back to a place where the whole banking system might collapse again? It only took 16 years to get back to that place after the last time. Glass-Steagall should have been reinstated, but this is why I say our system at this point is so broken, it can't be fixed democratically. Glass-Steagall was the obvious solution. It had protected the banking system for 60, 70 years at that point. There hadn't been another incident like that so clearly it was a mistake to repeal Glass-Steagall. They needed to bring it back. There is nobody in our government who is uncorrupted enough and untouched enough by the financial services industry that they would do such a thing as bring back Glass-Steagall. They are owned by these people.
And look, these people did not expect for any of this stuff to happen, right? I mean, that's why the book was called The End of History. They thought we were beyond this. That's part of why the Democrats cozied up to the banks, because there was, in their mind, there was not going to be a price to pay for that.
Right.
Because
Right.
history was only going one way, the right way, right here, right now. It's the 90s, right?
Yeah.
The
Yep.
internet, the end of history. The battle is won. We're not going to have economic crises anymore because communism has fallen, right? That's the only source of any economic crisis you could have, right? That conflict is over.
Right.
And so, yeah, we're going to cozy up to the banks because we need a piece of that Republican action. Otherwise, they're going to be the dominant party because there's never going to be a price to pay for this.
Right.
And boy, has it not played out that way.
No.
Because there's never an end of history, right? I mean, the
Of course
arrogance
not.
of it.
Well, it was a ridiculous idea.
It was a ridiculous idea. Such an arrogant idea. I mean, such a disgustingly arrogant premise that they based all of this on.
Well, I remember the articles in the 90s that were arguing that bull market was different because of the boomers, that it just wouldn't end for decades. And then, of course, you had the tech crash by 2000. You know, like right as they were writing those articles. So Kim Iverson has been covering an angle, and Barney Frank actually said this as well, that this is an attack on crypto banking, because both SVB and Signature Bank were heavily involved in crypto. Coinbase was banking with Signature, and another big crypto company was banking there. And Barney Frank says that the bank did not have to go down, that they were not in a position like that, but the feds came in preemptively and took it over, that they were not in a position that they had to be taken over. And he's saying that they're warning banks off dealing with crypto. That this Iverson is arguing more broadly that this is an intentional, coordinated attack on banks dealing with crypto because they want to clear the way for people to only be dealing with their digital currency and their federal currency. There are also theories floating around that I think, I'm not going to say conspiracy theory in a derogatory way. You know, I am a believer. How can you not be in these times of the meme? What's the difference between the truth and a conspiracy theory? About 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that this idea is wrong. Some people are saying they're trying to collapse the regional banks in order to centralize everything into the big banks and insert their digital currency, which will allow them to control your bank accounts in a way that they can't with a more diverse banking system. Look, that's wild speculation. I'm not presenting that as something that's true. For that matter, I was doing research on this crypto angle today, and I really couldn't find a source for it beyond Iverson. So I'm giving that information. I will do more research into it. I have a contact in a big financial firm. I'm going to talk to them about how plausible that is, and I'll comment on it a little bit on Sunday.
All right, perfect. That's pretty much a wrap. We got a couple super chats, Russell. Then I notice you flags here. Let's see here. System isn't broken. It is fixed. Yes, indeed.
Damn straight.
Damn straight. Thanks for the $2, Cool Blue. Long story short, thank you. Did you guys see Destiny versus Richard Spencer debate? No. No, I have not. You know, I have not. I mean, obviously, I don't follow Richard Spencer either, but but I have not followed Destiny at all.
He's a big fan of Jew Boys with a podcast.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. But I haven't followed Destiny at all, and I know some people watch him in our space. I just have never seen anything the guy's done. So no, I have not seen it. But perhaps I will look it up upon your recommendation there. Thank you for the donation. All right, is that everything? Man, this was an epic one tonight.
That was, yeah. This was
longer
our
than
Gandhi.
Yeah, this was longer than Gandhi. Yeah, indeed. I could tell this one was going long. Well, we had a few segments that went a little longer and deeper than we thought, but that's always a good thing. All right, everybody. Well, that's everything. We want to thank our the patrons. One more scroll here and one more shout out. You can go to patreon.com/DoDissidents and sign up. We had a bunch of signups this week. Kids aside, we are looking to perhaps add a third show per week at some point. We're thinking of maybe wanting to do a daytime show because we do have a considerable number of listeners across the pond who can't watch the show live anymore because now it's almost 5 in the morning there, 6 in the morning. I noticed when we did that Sunday matinee show, we had a lot of people who we hadn't seen in a while and people who live overseas.
Yeah.
So we're looking to probably add some sort of daytime show to the rotation. So we would love to do that. We also have some projects that are coming up that we're going to be announcing over the next couple of weeks. A fairly big one that we hope to be announcing within a week or two, maybe 2, but maybe even probably not by Sunday, but hopefully by Thursday, we could be able to roll that out and announce it and raise money off of it. Right? It'll be our version of the van, only we're actually going to do the van.
Only we're actually going to do what we said we were going to do.
Right, exactly. Oh, the van only with an actual follow through on this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like the investigative reporting team at TYT.
Yeah, TYT, right, exactly, all that stuff. But yeah, all that's in the works. So the more we get signed up at Patreon or Substack, and the more super chats we get in here, it all helps. It all helps us make as much of this stuff as we can, and we hope you guys dig it. We had a good crowd in here considering how long we went. Thank you guys for staying up with us and sticking around. That was a lot of fun. Shout out once again, Dirk, Automatic, Red Rebel D, Fujoshi C, Chet's Mom, and Chris Y, our new patrons for the past few days. Thank you guys very much. Nothing else to check on here. All right, that's it. We're done. Do you want to give a little ring of your singing bowl? Do you have it handy?
Okay.
All righty. Very well, everybody. Thank you very much. We will see you tomorrow for the film club. It'll premiere at 9 p.m., and then we'll be back here live Sunday nights at 7. Until then, be safe, be well. Thank you all very, very much once again. There we go. Thanks, everybody. Courage.
Please clap.